Every saloon girl carried a hidden weapon, but it wasn't what you think. This seemingly innocent item could end a man's life in seconds, and the sheriff always looked the other way. What was it? The American frontier in the 1800s wasn't exactly overflowing with career opportunities for young women. Your choices were pretty limited: work as a servant in someone else's house, toil away in a hot, dangerous factory, or maybe become a school teacher, if you were lucky enough to read well. Most of these jobs paid next to nothing, and offered about as much excitement as watching paint dry on a barn door. But then something interesting started happening. Colorful posters began appearing in eastern cities and tired farming communities, promising something completely different. High pay for ladies, they shouted in bold letters. Easy work in the exciting West. The advertisements painted pictures of adventure, good money, and freedom that most young women had never imagined possible. These weren't your typical help-wanted ads. The posters talked about work in saloons and dance halls, places where the music never stopped and the crowds were always lively. Compared to scrubbing floors for pennies or breathing cotton dust in a textile mill, saloon work sounded downright glamorous. The promise of wearing fancy dresses, meeting interesting people, and actually having fun while earning a living was pretty hard to resist. Well, for many young women, the decision to head west wasn't really about chasing adventure. Life had already dealt them some rough cards. Some had lost their parents to disease or accidents, leaving them with no family to rely on. Others came from families so poor that one less mouth to feed actually helped everyone survive. A few were running away from arranged marriages to men they couldn't stand, or escaping situations at home that were just plain awful. The West represented something powerful, a fresh start. Out there, nobody knew your family's reputation or cared about your past mistakes. You could reinvent yourself completely, maybe even pick a new name if you wanted. In a frontier town, what mattered wasn't where you came from, but whether you could handle whatever came your way. Then there were the women who simply craved something more than the life laid out for them. Farm life meant endless chores, early mornings, and the same routine day after day, year after year. City life for working-class women wasn't much better. Long hours in stuffy factories or wealthy people's kitchens, with barely enough pay to afford a tiny room in a crowded boarding house. The stories filtering back from the frontier made saloon work sound almost magical. Letters from friends who'd already made the journey described wearing beautiful gowns, dancing until dawn, and earning more money in a week than they'd made in months back home. Sure, some of the details were probably exaggerated, but even half the promised excitement sounded better than their current situations. Many women pooled their savings to buy train tickets, sometimes traveling in small groups for safety and moral support. Others suspected there might be more to the story, but figured they were tough enough to handle whatever came their way. But what really drove most of these women wasn't naivety or desperation, it was hope. Hope that somewhere out there was a place where their energy, personality, and willingness to work hard would actually be valued and rewarded. The question was, what would they actually find when they stepped off those dusty trains in rough frontier settlements where the saloons never seemed to close? The stagecoach lurched to a stop, dust swirling everywhere as wheels ground against packed dirt. Welcome to your new home. Main Street stretched ahead like something from a fever dream, wooden buildings leaning against each other for support, hitching posts crammed with horses, and more mud than you'd see after a spring flood. The noise hit you first. Hammers banging, men shouting, dogs barking, and from somewhere down the street, the distant tinkle of piano keys mixed with raucous laughter. Most frontier towns looked like they'd been thrown together in a weekend, because they had been. When gold or silver got discovered, entire settlements sprouted up faster than weeds. 1 month, empty prairie. Next month, 500 people living in tents and half-built shacks. The lucky towns got actual lumber shipped in, others made do with whatever they could scavenge. Then there's the smell. Nobody warned the girls about that part. Horse manure, unwashed bodies, cooking grease, and wood smoke all mixed into one powerful cocktail. Add in the dust that coated everything, your dress, your hair, even the inside of your mouth, and you started understanding why folks drank so much whiskey. It wasn't just for fun, but when evening rolled around, that's when the magic happened. Gas lamps flickered to life up and down the street. Piano music drifted from every saloon door. Laughter spilled onto wooden sidewalks. Men cleaned themselves up after long days mining or herding cattle, ready to spend their hard-earned money on entertainment. The whole street transformed from a dusty, chaotic mess into something that almost sparkled. Walking down that first evening, any newcomer quickly figured out the math. Men everywhere, standing in groups outside saloons, leaning against porch railings, crowding around card tables visible through open doors. Where were all the women? You might spot a few respectable ladies hurrying past with their heads down, maybe a shopkeeper's wife sweeping her front steps. But that was about it. The ratio was brutal. Some mining towns had 20 men for every woman, others were even worse. Cowboys, miners, gamblers, drifters, merchants, and every type of fortune seeker you could imagine, all of them hungry for female company, conversation, and entertainment. Most hadn't talked to a woman in months. Makes sense, right? Women back east had families, established lives, social circles. Why risk everything to follow some wild-eyed prospector into the middle of nowhere? But that shortage created opportunity. Men with pockets full of gold dust or silver coins needed somewhere to spend it. They wanted music, dancing, someone to laugh at their jokes and make them forget how lonely frontier life could get. Here's where things got tricky for new arrivals. Most frontier towns had grown so fast that nobody bothered building proper hotels or boarding houses. You might find a crude inn with shared rooms and questionable sheets. Maybe a widow rented out space in her back room, but decent, safe lodging for single women. Good luck with that. That's where saloon owners stepped in. They weren't all heartless businessmen looking to exploit desperate girls. Many genuinely tried to help newcomers find safe places to sleep. They knew the town, understood which boarding house owners could be trusted, which areas to avoid after dark. Some even let girls stay in rooms above their establishments until they found something better. The smart saloon owners protected their investment. Happy, healthy girls meant better entertainment, which meant more customers, which meant more money. Word traveled fast in small towns. If you treated your employees badly, other girls would hear about it and stay away. Then you'd be stuck with an empty saloon while your competitor down the street packed in crowds every night. But the girls quickly learned to stay alert. Friendly help sometimes came with strings attached. A free room might mean you owed someone more than just gratitude. Promises about respectable work didn't always match reality. The safest approach was finding other girls who'd been in town longer, getting the real story about which opportunities were legitimate and which ones to avoid. The evening bustle told its own story. Men streamed toward the brightest, loudest saloons like moths to lanterns. Music competed from different establishments. Ragtime piano from one place, fiddle music from another, maybe a girl with a decent voice singing popular songs. Each saloon tried to outdo the others with entertainment, decorations, and the prettiest girls they could hire. Standing on that dusty main street, surrounded by noise and chaos and opportunity, many girls felt their first real taste of what frontier life would demand. Everything moved faster here. Decisions had consequences. Trusting the wrong person could mean disaster. But for those brave enough to navigate the challenges, these rough and tumble towns offered something most places back east never could: the chance to reinvent yourself completely. What happened next depended on which saloon door you chose to walk through first. The moment a young woman stepped off the dusty stagecoach in a frontier town, colorful handbills seemed to appear everywhere. These weren't subtle advertisements tucked away in newspaper corners. Nope, these were bold, eye-catching notices plastered on every wooden post, saloon window, and general store wall. Ladies wanted, screamed the headlines in big fancy letters. Good pay, fine accommodations, respectable company guaranteed. Well, respectable might have been stretching it a bit. The handbills painted pictures of easy money and exciting nights. Free room and board sweetened the deal considerably, especially for girls who'd spent their last coins on a one-way ticket west. Some advertisements promised meals 3 times a day, which sounded like heaven to women who'd been surviving on bread crusts and hope. The really elaborate posters mentioned silk dresses, jewelry, and the chance to meet distinguished gentlemen of means. Towns sitting on gold or silver strikes desperately needed entertainment. Mining camps sprouted faster than weeds after rain, and suddenly thousands of lonely men had money burning holes in their pockets. These boom towns became magnets for saloon owners looking to strike it rich themselves. More miners meant more drinking meant more demand for pretty girls to dance with, sing songs and make the evening feel less like another day in a dangerous, dirty hole in the ground. But here's where things got interesting. The advertisements rarely mentioned the full truth about saloon work. Sure, they'd talk about dancing and singing, but they glossed over the smoke-filled rooms, the rowdy crowds, and the very real possibility of dodging flying bottles during brawls. The fine accommodations might turn out to be a cramped room shared with 3 other girls, and those distinguished gentlemen often included minors who hadn't bathed in weeks. Smart saloon owners knew exactly how to craft these advertisements. They understood that young women were looking for something better than 14-hour factory shifts or scrubbing other people's floors as domestic servants. The West represented freedom, adventure, and the possibility of making real money. Why wouldn't a girl choose dancing over darning socks for wealthy families back east? Then there were the safety in numbers advertisements. Some handbills specifically encouraged friends to come west together, promising group rates on lodging and transportation. This wasn't entirely a marketing gimmick. Saloon owners genuinely preferred hiring groups of friends because they looked out for each other, caused less drama, and were less likely to suddenly disappear in the middle of the night. Girls felt braver traveling with companions, and the promise of familiar faces in strange places made the whole adventure seem less terrifying. The timing of these advertisements mattered too. They appeared most frequently in Eastern newspapers during harsh winters when factory work was scarce and coal was expensive. A poster promising warm California evenings and steady pay looked mighty appealing to a girl shivering in a tenement building. Some advertisements even included testimonials from satisfied employees, describing their wonderful experiences and encouraging other young women to join them. Of course, not every advertisement was completely dishonest. Some saloon owners genuinely tried to run clean establishments and protect their employees. These places advertised their reputations honestly, mentioning their rules about customer behavior and their commitment to employee safety. The better establishments could afford to be pickier about their staff, so their advertisements often mentioned requirements like good character references or previous entertainment experience. The really clever advertisements played up the romance and glamour of frontier life. They described candlelit dance halls, elegant gowns, and the excitement of being part of a growing town's social scene. Some even suggested that marriage prospects were excellent, hinting that successful miners and ranchers were always looking for wives. This wasn't entirely false advertising either. Plenty of saloon girls did marry customers and settle down to more conventional lives. Competition between saloons made the advertisements increasingly elaborate. Owners started promising bonuses for girls who could play piano, sing popular songs, or speak multiple languages. Some offered clothing allowances, medical care, or even profit-sharing arrangements for their most popular employees. The most desperate establishments promised signing bonuses or paid transportation from as far away as New York or Chicago. But experienced frontier women learned to read between the lines of these flowery advertisements. They looked for specific details about working conditions, pay schedules, and house rules. Vague promises usually meant trouble, while detailed information suggested a more professional operation. The girls who answered these advertisements were about to discover whether the reality matched the promises. Some would find exactly what they'd hoped for: steady work, decent treatment, and a chance to build new lives. Others would realize they'd been sold a bill of goods by smooth-talking businessmen who cared more about profits than people. Either way, once those train tickets were purchased and those stagecoach seats reserved, there was no turning back. The next step meant walking through those swinging saloon doors for the very first time. Picture walking into a frontier saloon for the first time as a 19-year-old girl from Ohio. The batwing doors swing shut behind you, and suddenly you're hit by a wall of noise that makes your ears ring. Piano music crashes through conversations, men's laughter booms over the clinking of glasses, and somewhere in the back, a fiddler saws away at what might have been a waltz. The air tastes like whiskey and wood smoke, thick enough to choke on. Your new boss, probably a stern woman named Big Martha, or Diamond Lil, grabs your elbow and steers you toward a cluster of men playing cards. "Boys, meet our newest flower," she announces, her voice cutting through the racket like a knife through butter. 20 pairs of eyes turn your way, some curious, some hungry, all measuring you up like you're a prize heifer at auction. The regulars had their own unwritten rules about new girls. They'd size you up within minutes. Could you handle the jokes? Would you faint at the first crude comment? Did you have the backbone to laugh when old Pete spilled his drink on your shoes again? These weren't questions anyone asked out loud, but the answers determined whether you'd last a week or become part of the furniture. Then came the moment every new saloon girl dreaded and anticipated: choosing your stage name. Mary from Michigan became Silver Dollar Sally. Plain Jane turned into Champagne Charlotte. The name had to sparkle, had to promise something exciting. Nobody wanted to buy drinks for Prudence or dance with Gertrude. Your real name got locked away like a precious photograph, saved for letters home or whispered to your closest friends after midnight. But here's the thing, nobody tells you about that first night. The costume changes everything. You might have walked in wearing a simple traveling dress, but within an hour, you're laced into a creation of ruffles, ribbons and enough fabric to make a circus tent jealous. The dress doesn't just change how you look, it changes how you move, how you breathe, how you hold your shoulders. Some girls said the costume became like armor, protecting the real person underneath. The veteran girls watched from the sidelines during those first few hours, placing silent bets on who would crack first. Would the new girl burst into tears when Dirty Dan grabbed her waist too tight? Choopsie, would she slap someone and get fired before the night ended? Smart ones took new girls under their wing, whispering quick advice between songs. Smile even when you want to scream. Keep your tips in your left boot. Never let them see you count the money. Learning the rhythm took time. Saloons had their own musical heartbeat, fast during the busy hours, slow during card games, wild when someone struck gold or got good news from home. New girls stumbled through their first attempts at conversation, unsure whether to play shy maiden or bold frontier woman. The trick was reading each customer like a book, and becoming whatever character would keep them happy and spending. The noise level alone could overwhelm a girl fresh from farm country. Cowboys whooped when they won at poker. Miners sang drinking songs in 3 different languages. Gamblers slammed their fists on tables when luck turned sour. Through it all, the piano kept pounding out melodies, sometimes beautiful, sometimes barely recognizable as music. Your ears learned to filter the chaos, picking out important sounds, trouble brewing near the bar, your name being called, the dinner bell ringing upstairs. What surprised most new girls was how quickly the regulars learned their preferences. Within a week, certain customers knew whether you liked compliments about your dress or your dancing, whether you laughed at silly jokes or preferred clever wordplay, whether you wanted to hear about their adventures or preferred talking about the weather back east. The men who became your best customers weren't necessarily the richest or most handsome, they were the ones who paid attention. The first night always felt like a blur of faces, names, and new rules. Drink tickets worked differently than regular money. Dance cards filled up faster than you expected. Your feet started hurting before the evening really got rolling. The other girls seemed to glide through their routines while you stumbled over your own skirts, trying to remember which customer liked his whiskey neat and which one tipped extra for a second dance. Despite the chaos, something magical happened during those first few hours on the job. The nervousness never completely disappeared, but it mixed with excitement, creating an energy that kept you moving even when exhaustion crept in. The show absolutely had to go on, no matter what happened behind the scenes. And speaking of what happened behind the scenes, the real education began once the sun went down and the serious entertainment started. That's when new girls discovered that looking pretty in a fancy dress was just the beginning of saloon work. After that nerve-wracking first night, saloon girls quickly learned that looking the part wasn't optional. It was survival. The outfit made the woman in this business, and every ruffle, ribbon, and rouge application meant the difference between earning good money or going home empty-handed. These weren't your Sunday church dresses. Saloon girls wore what they called glad rags, colorful, flashy outfits designed to catch every man's eye in a smoky, dimly lit room. The dresses were shorter than respectable ladies would dare wear, often ending at mid-calf instead of brushing the floor. Bright reds, deep purples, emerald greens, and shocking pinks dominated the color palette. Makes sense, right? A girl in brown wool wouldn't exactly stand out among the crowd of dusty cowboys and miners. The construction of these dresses was pure theater. Multiple layers of ruffles cascaded down the skirts, creating movement with every step. Bustles pushed out the back, giving that exaggerated hourglass silhouette that men seemed to love. Corsets cinched waists impossibly tight, sometimes so tight that girls could barely breathe, let alone dance 50 turns a night. But the pain was worth it when tips started flowing. Stockings were a must, usually black or deep-colored, and they had to be perfect. Any runs or holes would be noticed immediately by sharp-eyed customers. The problem: good stockings were expensive, and saloon work was hard on hosiery. Smart girls learned to mend tiny tears with needle and thread, sometimes spending their afternoon breaks doing repairs that would keep them looking polished. Then there was the makeup situation. Painted lips were standard, bright red was the favorite shade, applied thick enough to survive hours of talking, laughing, and drinking. Rouge colored the cheeks in perfect circles, giving girls that healthy glow even after working until 3 in the morning. Some girls darkened their eyebrows with burnt cork or charcoal, creating dramatic expressions that read well in gaslight. But here's where things got creative. Many girls were working with practically nothing when they started. Borrowing and sharing costumes was common practice, especially among newcomers who hadn't built up their wardrobes yet. A successful girl might loan out an extra dress to help a friend make rent that week. Alterations happened constantly, letting out seams, taking in waists, adding new trim to freshen up an old outfit. The jewelry was mostly fake, but it sure didn't look like it under those flickering gas flames. Glass beads caught the light like diamonds. Brass pins and brooches added sparkle to necklines. Long dangly earrings swayed with every movement, drawing attention to pretty faces. The key was quantity. More was definitely more in saloon fashion. A girl might wear 3 necklaces at once, stack multiple bracelets on each wrist, and pin several brooches to her bodice. Hair accessories were crucial too. Ribbons, feathers, artificial flowers, and fancy combs transformed simple hairstyles into elaborate creations. Some girls spent hours arranging their hair into towering styles that added 6 inches to their height. Others preferred loose curls that bounced when they danced. Hair had to stay perfect all night, which meant lots of pins and plenty of hair pomade to keep everything in place. Well, let's not forget the practical side of all this glamour. Perfume was essential, not for romance, but for basic survival. Saloons reeked of tobacco smoke, spilled beer, unwashed bodies, and worse. Girls doused themselves in whatever fragrance they could afford, hoping to create a pleasant bubble of scent around themselves. Lavender water was popular because it was cheap. Rose water cost more, but lasted longer. Shoes presented their own challenges. Dancing shoes needed to be sturdy enough for hours of use, but pretty enough to complement the outfit. Most girls owned only 1 or 2 pairs of good shoes, which meant constant repairs. Heels broke, soles wore through, and straps snapped under the pressure of nightly performances. Some girls learned basic cobbler skills out of pure necessity. The weird part is how much time this whole routine took. Getting dressed for work was a 2-hour process on busy nights. Hair, makeup, costume, jewelry, every detail mattered. Girls who rushed through preparations usually regretted it when they saw their tips at the end of the night. Laundry became a major expense and time commitment. Those bright fabrics showed every stain, and dance hall work was messy business. Sweat, spilled drinks, cigar ash, and worse marked up dresses nightly. Hand-washing delicate fabrics without modern detergents meant dresses faded quickly and wore out fast. But when everything came together perfectly, the dress, the hair, the makeup, the confidence, a saloon girl could command attention from every man in the room. The transformation was remarkable. A tired young woman became a sparkling entertainment goddess, ready to charm customers and earn her keep. All this preparation was just the beginning though. Looking good was only half the battle in saloon life. Dancing wasn't the only skill saloon girls needed to survive. Sure, swaying to the music brought in customers, but smart girls quickly learned that entertainment came in many forms. The frontier was hungry for distraction, and these women became masters of keeping men happy and spending money. Singing was huge. Most saloons had at least one girl who could belt out popular tunes over the noise of gambling and drinking. Sweet Betsy from Pike and Oh, Susanna were crowd favorites, but the real money came from knowing what each regular wanted to hear. Cowboys loved sad ballads about home. Miners preferred rowdy drinking songs. The girl who could switch between a heartbreaking love song and a raunchy tavern tune. She was gold. Then there's the comedy angle. Saloon girls often worked as entertainers in the broadest sense, telling jokes and stories between dances. Frontier humor was rough and direct. No refined drawing room wit here. A girl who could make a table of gamblers laugh had them eating out of her hand, and laughing men were generous men. Card games became another specialty for many girls. Poker, faro, and Monty weren't just men's games. Women dealt cards, called bets, and sometimes played alongside customers. The twist? They weren't just there to win. Their real job was keeping players at the table, ordering drinks and staying in good spirits even when losing. A skilled saloon girl could stretch a poker game for hours, turning a simple hand into an all-night spending spree. But here's where things get interesting. The drink hustle was an art form. Girls didn't just serve alcohol, they orchestrated entire drinking experiences. They'd sit with customers, chat about anything and everything, and most importantly, encourage round after round of drinks. Come on Jake, one more whiskey won't hurt. The magic happened when customers bought drinks for the girls too. Most saloons operated on commission systems. Every drink a girl convinced someone to buy earned her a cut of the profits. 25 cents here, 50 cents there. It added up fast when you were good at your job. The best girls could earn more in tips and commissions than some skilled tradesmen made in regular wages. What made this work wasn't just charm, it was psychology. These women became amateur therapists, listening to miners complain about dangerous work, cowboys missing their families, and gamblers celebrating or mourning their luck. Lonely men paid premium prices for someone to actually listen to their problems. Smart girls remembered personal details, asked about sick relatives, and celebrated good news. Makes sense, right? The entertainment didn't stop at cards and conversation. Some girls played instruments, banjos, harmonicas, or small fiddles. Others specialized in dramatic recitations, performing popular poems or excerpts from famous plays. Remember, many frontier towns had no theaters, libraries, or cultural events. Saloon girls filled that gap, bringing music, literature, and performance to places that otherwise had none. Let's not forget the sheer physical demands of keeping customers happy. A successful saloon girl might dance 50 times in one night, serve hundreds of drinks, play cards until dawn, and still maintain that bright smile and cheerful attitude. Their feet ached, their voices went hoarse, and exhaustion was constant. Yet the show always had to go on. The weird part is how much skill this actually required. These women learned to read people instantly. Who was dangerous when drunk, who had money to spend, who needed gentle handling versus rough jokes. They developed incredible memories for faces, names, and personal stories. They mastered timing, knowing exactly when to approach a customer and when to give them space. Some girls specialized in particular types of entertainment. Maybe one became known for her Spanish guitar playing, while another built a reputation for incredible storytelling. Customers would return specifically to hear Maria's songs or listen to Catherine's tales of adventure. Building that kind of personal following meant steady income and regular tips. Competition between girls could get fierce over the most entertaining acts. Who could tell the funniest jokes? Who had the best singing voice? Whose card dealing kept games going longest? Success in entertainment often meant the difference between barely scraping by and actually saving money for the future. Well, the entertainment skills were just part of staying competitive. But behind all the laughing, singing, and card playing was a carefully calculated business strategy. Every joke had a purpose. Every song was chosen to keep customers spending. Every friendly conversation was designed to build loyalty and encourage return visits. The most successful saloon girls understood something crucial. They weren't just serving drinks or providing company, they were selling an experience, a temporary escape from the harsh realities of frontier life. Men didn't just want alcohol, they wanted to feel important, entertained, and cared for, and mastering these entertainment skills was essential preparation for navigating the complex daily routines that kept saloon girls competitive and profitable in this demanding work environment. Dawn rarely showed her face before most saloon girls opened their eyes. After nights that stretched past 2 a.m., sometimes closer to sunrise, sleeping until noon wasn't laziness, it was survival. The wooden floors above saloons creaked with the slow shuffle of women finally stirring to life, their bodies aching from hours of dancing, their throats scratchy from smoke and laughter. First priority, coffee, strong, bitter, and hot enough to burn away the fog in their heads. Most saloons kept a pot going for the girls, though the quality varied wildly. Some tasted like mud mixed with regret, others actually resembled something drinkable, but it was fuel, and fuel was what they needed to face another day. Breakfast was rarely fancy. Beans appeared on plates more often than eggs. Thick slices of bread, sometimes stale, filled empty stomachs. A lucky girl might find some bacon grease to spread on her bread, or a chunk of salt pork floating in her beans. Fresh fruit was a luxury most couldn't afford, and vegetables, those were for folks with gardens or enough money to pay premium prices at the general store. The weird part is how much time went into looking perfect for work, yet how little attention they paid to their appearance during the day. Hair hung loose and uncombed until afternoon. No rouge, no powder, no carefully painted lips, just tired women trying to get through the daylight hours before transforming into glittering entertainment. Laundry consumed huge chunks of their days. Makes sense, right? Those colorful, ruffled dresses absorbed everything. Smoke, sweat, spilled whiskey, and God knows what else from the previous night. Hand washing meant hauling water, heating it over fires, scrubbing fabric against washboards until knuckles bled, then hanging everything to dry. Winter made this torture even worse, with frozen fingers and clothes that took forever to dry indoors. Then there's the constant mending. Saloon life was hard on clothing. Tears from eager customers, worn-out seams from energetic dancing, and buttons that popped off during particularly lively nights. Girls became experts with needle and thread out of necessity. A ripped dress meant lost income, and lost income meant empty stomachs or unpaid rent. But afternoons held their own magic. This was when creativity bloomed. Some girls practiced new songs they'd heard travelers singing, working out harmonies with roommates or testing lyrics that might make cowboys weep into their whiskey. Others choreographed dance steps, trying moves they'd seen performed by more experienced girls or inventing their own flourishes to stand out from the competition. Hair required serious attention. Those elaborate styles didn't create themselves. Curling irons heated over flames, pins arranged just so, ribbons tied to catch the gaslight perfectly. A girl's hairstyle could make or break her night. Men noticed details like that, and men who noticed details tipped better. Well, shoe repair was another daily battle. Dancing on rough wooden floors destroyed footwear faster than anything else. Holes appeared in soles, heels came loose, straps snapped under pressure. Girls learned to cobble together repairs using whatever they could find. Scraps of leather, strong thread, even pieces of cloth stuffed inside worn-out shoes for cushioning. Some girls used afternoons for letter writing. Families back east received carefully edited versions of their daughters' lives. "Work is going well, and the people here are kind," appeared in many letters, while the truth stayed buried. Others wrote to friends who'd scattered to different towns, sharing gossip, warnings about dangerous customers, or dreams of better days ahead. Let's not forget the shopping that needed doing. Supplies ran low constantly. Powder, rouge, perfume, stockings, soap. The list never ended. General stores marked up prices for saloon girls, knowing they had limited options and steady income. Smart girls formed buying groups, pooling money to get better deals on bulk purchases, and the weird part is how much time went into planning escapes. Not dramatic midnight flights, but practical discussions about the future. Girls shared information about other towns, better paying saloons or opportunities outside the business entirely. These conversations happened in whispers, during dress fittings or hair arrangements, always careful not to let owners overhear. Afternoons also meant dealing with the consequences of the previous night. Bruises needed tending. Hurt feelings required soothing. Arguments between girls had to be settled before evening work began. The smart ones learned that grudges were expensive luxuries they couldn't afford. By 6 o'clock, the transformation began. Out came the glad rags, the paint pots, the jewelry boxes filled with glittering fake gems. The tired, ordinary women of the afternoon started disappearing, replaced by the sparkling, laughing creatures who would soon fill the saloon with music and movement. But before the evening chaos consumed everything, there was usually one quiet moment, a deep breath, a last look in the cracked mirror, a silent prayer to whatever God watched over women like them. Because once those saloon doors opened and the piano started playing, there'd be no time for rest until the sun rose again. When the sun dipped behind the mountains and kerosene lamps flickered to life, the real work began. Dancing wasn't some free-for-all party where girls just swayed around whenever they felt like it. No way. Saloon owners ran tight ships with rules that would make an army sergeant proud. 8 o'clock sharp meant showtime. The piano player cracked his knuckles, straightened his vest, and launched into the first tune of the night. Girls lined up like soldiers, checking their hair ribbons one last time. Ready or not, here came the cowboys. Each dance lasted exactly 15 minutes. Not 14, not 16, 15, sharp. The saloon keeper watched the clock like his life depended on it, because honestly it did. Too long with one customer meant other men got restless, started fights or worse, walked out to spend their money somewhere else. Popular girls faced a grueling marathon, 50 dances in one night. That happened more often than you'd think. Do the math. That's over 12 hours of non-stop spinning, stepping and smiling. Your feet would be screaming by dance number 10, but the night was just getting started. The golden rule echoed through every saloon from California to Colorado. Never dance for free. Ever. Men paid 25 cents for a quick waltz, 50 cents for something fancier. That might not sound like much, but in those days, 50 cents could buy you a decent meal or a night's lodging. Smart girls made sure every step counted toward their earnings. Saloon owners hammered this message home daily. Don't get attached to one fella, they'd warn. Keep 'em moving, keep 'em paying. Made perfect business sense, even if it felt cold sometimes. A girl who spent too much time giggling with her favorite cowboy wasn't just hurting her own pocket, she was costing the whole establishment money. Then there were the unwritten rules that every girl learned fast. Don't let drunk customers get too grabby during slow songs. Keep conversations light and flirty, never too personal. Always smile, even when your corset felt like it was crushing your ribs. And for heaven's sake, don't let on if you had a headache or sore throat. Some establishments got creative with their pricing. A simple two-step cost less than a complicated polka. Dancing with the house favorites, the prettiest or most talented girls commanded premium rates. New girls often started cheaper until they proved they could handle the crowd and keep men coming back for more. The music never stopped, but the girls rotated in shifts. While Mary danced with a minor, Sarah caught her breath and fixed her makeup. When Sarah took the floor, Mary grabbed a quick sip of water and adjusted her stockings. It was like a well-oiled machine, except the machine wore petticoats and painted lips. Competition between girls could get fierce. Who got picked for the most dances? Who earned the biggest tips? Jealousy sometimes bubbled over when one girl consistently out-earned the others. Smart saloon owners learned to manage these tensions before they exploded into full-blown catfights. But here's what most people don't realize. The physical demands were brutal. Try dancing for 12 hours straight in a corset, long skirts and button-up boots. Add cigarette smoke so thick you could barely see across the room, plus the stench of unwashed men and spilled beer. These women were athletes, whether they knew it or not. The good news, tips could be generous. A successful night might net a girl more money than a seamstress made in a week. Cowboys flush with gold dust or cattle drive pay often threw around cash like confetti. A girl who could make a lonely man forget his troubles for 15 minutes usually found her pockets heavier by morning. Some saloons instituted dance cards, little booklets where men could sign up for future dances. Popular girls filled their cards early, guaranteeing steady income for the evening. Less popular girls had to work harder, flirting with wallflowers and coaxing shy customers onto the dance floor. The music finally died down around 2 or 3 in the morning, depending on the crowd. Girls counted their earnings, nursed their aching feet, and tried to unwind from the constant performance. Tomorrow night meant doing it all over again. Well, dancing was just one part of the show. These girls had plenty of other tricks up their ruffled sleeves to separate customers from their hard-earned cash, and some of those tricks were downright clever. Working as a saloon girl required more than just looking pretty and dancing with cowboys. Smart girls learned tricks that kept them safe, profitable, and one step ahead of trouble. The women who lasted in this business weren't just entertainers. They were clever operators who knew how to work every angle. The most important trick: that drink you just bought her wasn't actually whiskey. While most saloon girls sipped colored water or weak tea from fancy glasses, while their customers knocked back the real stuff. Men believed they were sharing honest drinks with tipsy ladies, but the girls stayed sharp and sober. This fake drinking game served everyone's interests. Customers felt like big spenders treating their favorite girl to expensive liquor, while the saloon made pure profit selling tap water at whiskey prices. Girls earned a commission on every drink purchased for them. A smart performer could rack up 20 or 30 drinks in a single night, pocketing a few cents each time. The math worked beautifully. Pretend to get drunk, encourage more spending, and walk away with real money while keeping a clear head. Acting tipsy became an art form. Girls giggled at terrible jokes, stumbled just enough to seem charming, and let their words slur slightly as the night progressed. Men ate it up. They felt protective of these supposedly intoxicated beauties, ordering round after round to keep the party going. Meanwhile, the girls mentally counted every fake drink, calculating their growing earnings. Then there were the regulars who needed special handling. Some customers showed up every payday with specific requests. They wanted to hear particular songs, dance to certain tunes, or just talk about their troubles. Experienced girls kept mental notes about their best customers. Big Jim liked hearing about his home state. Poker Pete always requested the same waltz. Railroad Charlie tipped extra when girls complimented his new boots. Memory became currency in this business. Girls who remembered names, stories and preferences earned fierce loyalty from customers. They'd write down details after work: who was married, who struck gold recently, who seemed ready to spend big. This wasn't just friendly conversation, it was strategic relationship building that translated directly into tips and repeat business. Managing money required constant vigilance. Girls learned to hide their best earnings immediately, sometimes stuffing coins into secret dress pockets or passing cash to trusted friends for safekeeping. Drunk customers occasionally tried grabbing money back, claiming they'd been cheated. Quick hands and quicker thinking prevented many disputes before they escalated. Smart performers also mastered the art of controlled flirtation. They had to seem available and interested without making promises they couldn't keep. Too little attention meant poor tips. Too much attention created dangerous obsessions or jealous fights between customers. The best girls walked this tightrope nightly, making every man feel special while keeping everyone at arm's length. Some girls developed signals with bartenders and bouncers for sticky situations. A hand pressed to her throat might mean this customer is getting too rough. Adjusting her hair ribbon could signal send help in 5 minutes. These silent communications helped everyone stay safe during busy, chaotic nights. When shouting for help wasn't possible, reading the room became second nature. Experienced girls sensed when fights were brewing and positioned themselves near exits. They recognized when customers were too drunk to spend wisely, and when fresh arrivals had money burning holes in their pockets. This situational awareness separated successful performers from those who struggled or got hurt. Even clothing choices were strategic. Dresses with hidden pockets kept small valuables safe. Sturdy boots helped girls move quickly when necessary. Fake jewelry looked impressive in dim gaslight but didn't tempt thieves. Every accessory served both fashion and function in an environment where looking good and staying safe required constant balance. The competition between girls created its own set of survival tactics. Some formed alliances, sharing information about difficult customers or particularly generous spenders. Others worked alone, guarding their trade secrets jealously. The smartest performers found ways to stand out without making enemies. Specializing in particular songs, developing signature dance moves, or becoming known for specific skills like card tricks or storytelling. Managing energy levels through long nights took careful planning. Girls paced themselves, taking breaks when possible and saving their best performances for the biggest spenders. They learned which foods gave them energy, and which drinks actually helped rather than hindered their work. This wasn't glamorous, but it was professional survival in a demanding job. But tricks and tactics only went so far when dealing with the diverse crowd of men who filled these establishments nightly. Cowboys, miners, gamblers and drifters all brought different expectations, different amounts of money, and different levels of respect for the women entertaining them. Understanding these various customer types became essential knowledge for any girl hoping to build a steady income and avoid serious trouble. Cowboys stumbled in with dust still coating their boots from week-long cattle drives. Miners arrived clutching leather pouches heavy with gold dust, their fingernails black from digging in mountain rock faces. Gamblers floated between tables like smoke, their fancy vests hiding loaded dice and marked cards. Drifters wandered through with everything they owned wrapped in a bedroll, looking for one good night before moving on to the next town. These weren't just customers, they were the lifeblood of every frontier saloon. Each type brought their own flavor of chaos and cash. Cowboys whooped and hollered after months of talking only to cattle and horses. They'd blow 3 months' wages in a single evening, desperate for feminine conversation and the rustle of silk dresses. The smart saloon girls learned quickly which cowboys were spenders and which ones nursed a single beer all night. Then there were the miners, rough men who'd strike it rich one day and go broke the next. They carried gold dust in small leather bags, weighing it out for drinks and dances like it was flour at the general store. Some girls became experts at reading a miner's luck just by watching how freely he scattered his dust on the bar. A successful day at the mines meant generous tips and expensive champagne. A bad day meant empty pockets and sad stories about the claim that almost hit pay dirt. But here's where things got interesting. Regulars changed everything. These weren't random faces passing through town. They were men who showed up every Friday night, knew the girls' stage names, and had favorite spots at the bar. Some brought wildflowers picked on the way to town. Others carved wooden trinkets during slow afternoons, presenting them shyly like schoolboys with crushes. Big Jim Morrison always requested the same corner table and asked specifically for Sarah to serve his whiskey. He'd been coming to the Dusty Rose Saloon for 2 years, ever since his wife died of fever. Sarah knew he had 3 children living with his sister back in Missouri. She knew he sent most of his earnings home and kept just enough for rent, food, and his weekly visit. When Sarah danced, Big Jim never hooted or grabbed like the younger men. He just watched with tired eyes that seemed grateful for a few hours of forgetting. The girls developed an almost motherly knowledge of their regulars' lives. They remembered birthdays, worried about dangerous mining accidents, and celebrated when someone struck gold or found steady work. Dutch Henry always complained about his bad knee. Poker Pete shared stories about his daughter getting married back east. Young Tom Wilson was saving money to bring his sweetheart west for their wedding. These relationships weren't just business, though the money certainly mattered. Real friendships bloomed in the smoky haze of frontier saloons. Girls learned to read men's moods better than their own mothers could. They knew when someone needed cheering up, when to listen quietly, and when to suggest maybe it was time to head home before the wages ran out completely. Some regulars became protective of their girls. When strangers got too rough or demanding, old-timers would step in with quiet authority. "That's enough, partner," was usually all it took. The unspoken code meant regulars looked out for the girls, and the girls made sure their favorite customers felt special and welcome. But the relationship had its complications too. Some men fell genuinely in love, bringing marriage proposals along with their weekly tips. Others grew possessive, causing jealous scenes when they saw their favorite girl laughing with someone else. A few regulars showed up drunk and angry, taking out their frustrations about hard lives on the women who'd been nothing but kind to them. Smart girls learned to navigate these emotional waters carefully. They offered friendship and warmth without making promises they couldn't keep. The really skilled ones made every man feel like the most important customer in the room, even when serving a dozen others the same evening. The strangest part was how these rough frontier men often revealed their gentler sides in the presence of saloon girls. Hardened miners talked about their mothers, tough cowboys admitted they were scared of dying alone on the range. Gamblers confessed their superstitions and lucky charms. The girls became unofficial therapists, hearing confessions that would never be shared in churches or general stores. Some regulars brought news from the outside world, letters from back east, gossip from other towns, warnings about bad weather or Indian troubles. In return, the girls shared local news and kept the men connected to their temporary community. The bonds formed in these smoky rooms often lasted years. When girls moved on or got married, regulars would ask about them for months afterward. When longtime customers died in mining accidents or shootouts, the girls genuinely mourned their loss. These weren't just business transactions happening in frontier saloons. They were complex human connections forming in the most unexpected places, but keeping those connections healthy while staying safe required skills that most young women had never needed before arriving in the Wild West. Working in a frontier saloon wasn't just about dodging wandering hands and awkward pickup lines. The real dangers could turn deadly in seconds. When men carried guns, drank heavily, and had been away from civilization for months, explosive situations became part of the job description. Violence erupted without warning in these establishments. A friendly card game could transform into a knife fight over a suspected cheat. Cowboys celebrating payday might start shooting at the ceiling for fun, sending wood splinters raining down on everyone below. Miners fresh from successful claims often arrived with gold dust, bad attitudes, and loaded weapons. The combination rarely ended well. Smart saloon girls learned to read the room like their lives depended on it, because they did. They watched for telltale signs of brewing trouble. Raised voices near the poker table meant potential gunplay. A man drinking alone while staring at nothing usually spelled danger. Groups of strangers eyeing the regulars often brought robbery attempts. The girls developed an almost supernatural ability to sense when things were about to go sideways. But what happened when a customer turned his anger directly on them? Refusing a man's advances could trigger violent rage, especially if he'd been drinking. Some men took rejection as a personal insult worth fighting over. Others assumed every girl was available for the right price and became furious when told otherwise. These confrontations could escalate from verbal abuse to physical assault in heartbeats. Then there were the truly dangerous customers who showed up specifically looking for trouble. Outlaws hiding from the law often frequented saloons, bringing their paranoia and quick tempers with them. Gamblers who'd lost big sometimes blamed the entertainment rather than their own poor choices. Drifters with nothing left to lose posed unpredictable threats to everyone around them. The girls weren't defenseless though. Many carried small pistols tucked into their garters or corsets. Others preferred derringers, tiny but deadly firearms that could be concealed almost anywhere. Some opted for knives, hatpins, or small daggers hidden in their boots. Learning to use these weapons effectively became as important as learning to dance or sing. Self-defense wasn't just about weapons. Experienced girls mastered the art of strategic positioning. They stayed near exits whenever possible. They learned which tables offered the best escape routes during fights. They memorized which floorboards creaked and might give away their movements. They even practiced slipping out of restrictive corsets quickly if they needed to run. Saloon brawls followed their own brutal logic. What started as an argument between two men could engulf the entire room within minutes. Chairs became weapons. Bottles transformed into clubs. Tables turned into shields. The The girls caught in these melees faced serious injury from flying fists, broken glass, and stray bullets. Some learned to drop behind the bar at the first sign of trouble, while others scrambled for the stairs leading to safety. The really smart girls cultivated relationships with the saloon's bouncers and security. These tough men, often former soldiers, boxers, or ranch hands, served as the first line of defense against unruly customers. A girl who treated the bouncers well could count on protection when things got rough. They'd step in when a customer got too aggressive or escort threatening individuals outside before situations escalated. Saloon owners had mixed motivations when it came to protecting their girls. Good owners recognized that safe, happy employees meant better business and fewer problems with local law enforcement. They hired reliable security, installed better lighting, and established clear rules about customer behavior. Bad owners saw the girls as expendable and cared more about avoiding conflicts with paying customers than protecting their workers. Some establishments developed elaborate warning systems. A girl in trouble might signal the piano player, who'd switch to a specific song that alerted security. Others used hand signals or code words to communicate danger without alarming customers. The most sophisticated saloons had emergency bells or whistles that could summon help instantly. Local law enforcement's response to saloon violence varied dramatically. Some sheriffs treated these incidents seriously and investigated thoroughly. Others viewed saloon troubles as occupational hazards that didn't merit much attention. A few corrupt lawmen actually contributed to the problem by taking bribes from troublemakers or participating in the violence themselves. The psychological toll of constant danger affected every girl differently. Some became hardened and suspicious, trusting no one completely. Others developed nervous habits or suffered from what we'd now recognize as anxiety disorders. Many learned to compartmentalize their fears, putting on brave faces while internally calculating risks and escape routes. Despite all these precautions and preparations, tragedies still occurred. Girls were beaten, shot, stabbed, or worse by customers they couldn't avoid or predict. Some disappeared entirely, their fates unknown. Others survived attacks but bore physical and emotional scars for the rest of their lives. The successful saloon girls were often the ones who balanced friendliness with firmness, knowing exactly how far to let situations develop before drawing their lines in the sand. But even the most careful and prepared girls couldn't eliminate every risk in an environment where danger lurked behind every smile and friendly gesture. This constant threat made their daily earnings feel well-deserved, assuming they lived long enough to spend them. Now here's where things get interesting. While most folks back east were scraping by on pennies, some saloon girls were making serious money. We're talking about women who could earn more in a single week than a hard-working miner pulled in during an entire month of back-breaking labor underground. The money came from multiple streams, and smart girls learned to work every angle. Tips formed the foundation of their income. Cowboys flush with cattle drive wages would toss silver dollars like confetti when they were feeling good. But earning money was only half the battle. Keeping it, that required serious strategy. Smart girls faced constant expenses that ate into their profits. Those flashy dresses everyone admired. They cost a fortune and wore out quickly from all the dancing, spilled drinks, and cigarette burns. A decent saloon dress might cost $15, more than a cowboy earned in 2 weeks of hard riding. Then there were stockings, shoes that lasted maybe a month with heavy use, ribbons, jewelry, perfume, and hair accessories. The successful ones learned to budget like businesswomen. They'd set aside money for dress repairs, negotiate group deals with seamstresses, and sometimes share expensive accessories with trusted friends. Some even learned basic sewing to extend the life of their costumes. Many girls sent money home to struggling families back east. A daughter working in a frontier saloon might be the only thing standing between her parents and the poorhouse. These women carried enormous responsibility on their shoulders, knowing that siblings might depend on their earnings for food or schooling. The really clever ones started thinking bigger. Sarah Chen, who worked the gold camps in Colorado, saved every spare dollar for 2 years before opening her own boarding house. She understood that saloon work had a short shelf life. Younger girls kept arriving, and the job took a physical toll. Her boarding house eventually housed other working women and provided steady, respectable income. Some girls invested in land when they could. Property was cheap in many frontier towns, and owning a small plot meant security. Martha Williams bought a tiny lot behind the main street in Tombstone for $30. Years later, when the town boomed, she sold it for $300. Then there's the story of Belle Richardson, who saved enough to buy her own saloon. She understood the business from the ground up and knew exactly what customers wanted. Within 5 years she owned 3 establishments and employed dozens of girls. Talk about turning the tables. But let's not forget the risks that came with carrying cash in lawless towns. Girls developed ingenious hiding places for their savings. Money got sewn into dress hems, buried in small tins behind buildings, or hidden in fake jewelry boxes with secret compartments. Some trusted bank safes when available, but many frontier towns lacked proper banking facilities. The most successful saloon girls treated their work like any other business venture. They tracked their best customers, remembered birthdays and personal details that led to bigger tips, and built loyal followings. A regular customer might spend his entire monthly wages on his favorite girl over the course of several visits. Weather played a huge role in earnings too. Winter months often meant fewer travelers and less money flowing through town. Smart girls saved extra during busy summer seasons to carry them through lean times. Cattle drive season, mining booms, or railroad construction projects could triple a girl's income overnight. The money was real, the opportunities genuine, but success required business sense that many young women had to learn fast. Those who mastered the financial side of saloon life often built foundations for completely different futures. However, earning good money also brought unexpected complications that most girls never anticipated when they first stepped off those dusty stagecoaches. Running a saloon in the Old West wasn't like opening a lemonade stand. Towns had rules about everything from piano music to what happened upstairs. The funny thing, every settlement made up its own laws as they went along. Most frontier towns desperately wanted the tax money from saloons, but they also needed to look respectable for church folk and visiting businessmen. This created some creative legal gymnastics. Towns would license saloons for dancing and music, then conveniently forget to ask too many questions about other activities. As long as the monthly fees kept rolling in, local authorities stayed surprisingly blind to certain goings-on. The licensing fees weren't cheap either. A basic saloon permit might cost $50, serious money when most cowboys earned $30 a month. Dancing licenses cost extra. Music permits were another fee. Some towns charged separate licenses for card games, billiards, even selling cigars. Smart saloon owners factored these costs into their drink prices, which meant customers ultimately paid for the legal paperwork through more expensive whiskey. Then there were the entertainment licenses. This is where things got murky. Some girls needed individual performer permits to work as dancers or singers. Others operated under the saloon's general entertainment license. The paperwork was usually vague on purpose. Nobody wanted to spell out exactly what entertainment meant. Prostitution laws created the biggest headache. Some territories banned it completely on paper while collecting hefty fines from working girls every month. These weren't really fines, they were unofficial licenses disguised as punishment. Girls would get arrested, pay their fine, then go right back to work until next month's collection. The system worked for everyone involved, especially the town treasury. Other places took a more direct approach. They'd designate certain streets or districts where soiled doves could operate legally. These red light zones kept the business contained while generating steady tax revenue. Virginia City had such a district. So did Tombstone. Local newspapers might complain in their editorials, but the town councils loved the money too much to shut anything down. The weird part is how different towns handled the same problems. Dodge City required madams to register their businesses and pay quarterly fees. Meanwhile, Deadwood pretended the whole thing didn't exist while secretly collecting protection money from brothel owners. Some places demanded health certificates from working girls, though finding a doctor willing to examine them was another challenge entirely. Madams faced their own legal maze. Running a brothel required navigating multiple licenses, permits, and unofficial agreements with local officials. The smartest ones kept detailed records of every payment made to authorities. This paperwork served as insurance. If officials tried to shut them down, madams could threaten to reveal exactly who had been taking money under the table. Law enforcement varied wildly from town to town. Some sheriffs treated saloon girls fairly, protecting them from violent customers while enforcing basic peace. Others saw the women as easy targets for shakedowns. A corrupt sheriff might demand personal favors or money in exchange for looking the other way when trouble started. But here's what made the system really complicated. Jurisdictions kept changing. Territorial laws might conflict with local ordinances. Federal marshals occasionally swept through towns, enforcing different rules than local authorities. Military posts near towns had their own regulations about soldiers visiting saloons. Girls working the same job might face completely different legal situations depending on which lawman showed up. Some enterprising madams learned to work the system like professionals. They'd maintain clean, quiet establishments that attracted wealthy customers while staying on good terms with local officials. These women understood that reputation mattered more than rules. A well-run house with satisfied customers and happy officials could operate for decades without serious legal problems. The licensing fees and legal complications also created unexpected opportunities. Some saloon girls saved enough money to buy their own establishments, learning the business from both sides. They understood which officials needed regular payments, which laws actually got enforced, and how to keep customers happy without attracting unwanted attention from authorities. Marriage sometimes provided the ultimate legal escape. A saloon girl who married a respectable local man could completely reinvent herself legally and socially. Her past might be whispered about, but as a married woman she gained legal protections and social standing that no amount of licensing could provide. Yet even with all these rules, fees and legal complications, the business thrived. Towns needed the entertainment and tax revenue. Men wanted the company and excitement. Girls found better opportunities than most jobs offered women at the time. The legal framework around saloon life created its own weird economy of bribes, licenses and unofficial agreements. Everyone involved understood the game, even if nobody wanted to admit it publicly. This delicate balance between law and reality shaped how saloon girls navigated their daily lives, but it couldn't protect them from the real dangers that came with the territory. The truth about saloon girls and prostitution gets twisted in most stories you hear. Hollywood loves painting every dance hall woman as a soiled dove, but reality was far messier and more complicated than that stereotype suggests. Not every girl who worked in a saloon sold her body. Many drew hard lines between dancing for tips and anything beyond that. The money from entertaining customers, selling drinks and keeping men company often paid well enough that additional services weren't necessary. A popular dancer could earn more in a week than most working women made in months just from her charm and conversation skills. But let's be honest, some women did turn to prostitution. The reasons varied wildly. Some faced crushing poverty after losing family members or fleeing abusive situations back home. Others discovered that dancing alone couldn't cover their expenses, especially when business slowed during harsh winters or economic downturns. The frontier could be brutal, and survival sometimes demanded difficult choices. What's fascinating is how different towns handled the whole situation. Some settlements kept dance halls and brothels completely separate. You had your entertainment venues on one side of town, and the red light district somewhere else entirely. Other places mixed everything together, creating confusion that still clouds our understanding today. The girls themselves often made deliberate distinctions. Sarah, who worked in Deadwood, might spend her evenings dancing and chatting with minors, while her roommate Emma operated under completely different rules. They could live in the same boarding house, work in the same building, yet lead entirely separate professional lives. Makes sense, right? Then there's the economic reality that nobody talks about. Dance hall work paid incredibly well for its time. A girl could earn 50 cents per dance when factory workers made $1 for an entire day's labor. Smart women realized they didn't need to offer additional services when their dancing skills alone brought in steady income. Why complicate a good thing? Some women found genuine freedom in saloon work, believe it or not. After escaping restrictive families or oppressive marriages, the frontier offered independence they'd never experienced. They could choose their customers, set their boundaries and keep their earnings. For women who'd spent their lives being told what to do, this autonomy felt revolutionary. But circumstances could change quickly out west. A mining boom might bring thousands of men to town, creating incredible demand for entertainment. When the mines played out, those same men disappeared overnight, leaving girls scrambling for income. Economic desperation pushed some women toward choices they'd previously avoided. The weird part is how some communities created their own unofficial rules. Certain establishments gained reputations as clean dance halls where respectable entertainment was the only option. Other places became known for offering everything under the sun. Customers learned which venues matched their expectations, and girls chose their workplaces accordingly. Many women felt trapped between limited options and social judgment. Domestic work paid poorly and offered little freedom. Factory jobs were dangerous and exhausting. Teaching required education most frontier women lacked. Saloon work might not have been ideal, but it provided better pay and more control than most alternatives available to working-class women. Let's not forget the stories of women who used dance hall earnings to build different futures. Some saved every penny to open legitimate businesses like restaurants or boarding houses. Others bought land or invested in mining claims. The income from entertaining men became their pathway toward respectability and financial security. Religious groups and women's temperance societies constantly pressured communities to shut down saloons entirely. They rarely distinguished between different types of establishments or acknowledged that many girls were simply trying to earn honest livings. This black and white thinking ignored the complex realities facing working women on the frontier. Some of the most successful madams started as dance hall girls themselves. They understood the business from both sides and often provided better working conditions for their employees than male saloon owners did. These women created their own economic empires while protecting the girls under their care. The question of choice versus circumstance remains complicated. Some women actively sought out frontier entertainment work, viewing it as an adventure or opportunity. Others ended up in saloons through desperation, bad luck, or limited alternatives. Both experiences were valid, and both shaped the development of Western communities. Personal relationships complicated everything further. Girls sometimes fell in love with regular customers, creating emotional connections that blurred professional boundaries. Others maintained strict separation between work and personal life, refusing to let business relationships become anything more intimate. What emerges from these stories is a picture of women navigating impossible situations with whatever tools they had available. Some found empowerment in saloon work, others felt degraded by it, and many experienced both feelings simultaneously. The health risks and social dangers these women faced daily created an environment where every choice carried serious consequences. Understanding their complex motivations requires looking beyond simple moral judgments to see the harsh realities that shaped their decisions. Their daily struggles with physical safety reveal just how dangerous frontier life could become for women working in public entertainment. The glamorous image of saloon life crumbles pretty quickly when you look at what it did to women's bodies. Those smoky, crowded rooms weren't just uncomfortable, they were genuine health hazards. Every night, girls breathed in thick clouds of cigar and cigarette smoke that hung like fog in poorly ventilated spaces. The air was so thick you could practically chew it. Respiratory problems hit almost everyone eventually. Chronic coughs became as common as painted lips. Many girls developed what people called saloon lung, a persistent wheeze that never quite went away. But here's the thing. Complaining about a cough could get you fired faster than missing a dance. Weakness wasn't tolerated in a business built on energy and entertainment. Then there were the diseases that spread like wildfire through these packed establishments. With dozens of sweaty bodies pressed together night after night, germs had a field day. Influenza outbreaks could wipe out half a saloon's girls in a week. Tuberculosis was an ever-present threat that people whispered about but rarely discussed openly. One sick girl could infect an entire crew before anyone realized what was happening. Medical care, well, that's where things got really grim. Most frontier towns had maybe one doctor if they were lucky. These medical men were usually overwhelmed treating gunshot wounds, mining accidents, and broken bones. A saloon girl with mysterious symptoms or women's troubles wasn't exactly their top priority. Many doctors looked down on these women anyway, refusing to treat them with the same care they'd give a banker's wife. The remedies available were primitive at best. Patent medicines filled with alcohol or opium promised miracle cures but delivered addiction instead. Girls suffering from exhaustion might dose themselves with laudanum just to keep working. What started as pain relief quickly became dependency, creating a vicious cycle that trapped women in deteriorating health. Physical injuries were constant companions in this line of work. Dancing 50 times a night in flimsy shoes destroyed feet and legs. Blisters, bunions, and swollen ankles were occupational hazards. Some girls' feet became so mangled they could barely walk during daylight hours, yet they still had to perform when evening came. The combination of alcohol, late nights, and constant stress wreaked havoc on these women's systems. Many lived on liquid calories, whiskey and beer instead of proper meals. Malnutrition was common, leaving girls vulnerable to every illness that came through town. Their bodies were running on empty while being pushed to entertaining limits night after night. Let's not forget the violence that left lasting marks. Black eyes, split lips, and bruised ribs were part of the job description. Some injuries never healed properly because girls couldn't afford time off to recover. A broken wrist might be wrapped with cloth strips and expected to work the same evening. The show, as they say, must go on. Pregnancy complications added another layer of danger. Birth control was practically non-existent, and unwanted pregnancies were common. Back alley procedures performed by untrained doctors killed more women than anyone wanted to admit. Those who carried to term often faced difficult births with minimal medical support. Mental health took brutal beatings too, though people didn't understand it the same way we do now. The constant pressure to smile, laugh, and entertain while dealing with harassment and danger created what we'd now recognize as severe anxiety and depression. Some girls turned to drink or drugs just to numb the emotional pain of their circumstances. Sleep deprivation was another silent killer. Working until 3 or 4 in the morning, then trying to sleep in noisy boarding houses during the day, left everyone chronically exhausted. This constant tiredness made everything worse. Judgment suffered, immune systems weakened, and accidents became more frequent. The stories of early death were tragically common. Girls in their 20s looked 40 from the wear and tear. Heart problems, liver disease, and mysterious ailments claimed lives regularly. Some simply collapsed one night and never got back up. Others faded slowly, growing thinner and paler until they quietly disappeared from the scene entirely. What makes these health struggles even more heartbreaking is how isolated these women were when sickness struck. Far from family, with few real friends and limited resources, a sick saloon girl often faced her battles alone. The other girls might help when they could, but everyone was fighting their own survival battle. Despite all these challenges, many women showed remarkable resilience. They shared home remedies, looked after each other during illness, and found ways to keep going when their bodies wanted to quit. Some even managed to save enough money to escape before their health gave out completely. But the toll was undeniable, and the lucky ones who survived learned that taking care of friendships with other girls wasn't just about companionship. It was about creating a support system that might mean the difference between life and death when trouble struck. Working alongside other women in the saloon world meant navigating a complex web of relationships that could make or break a girl's success. Competition was fierce, friendships were precious, and rivalries could turn deadly. The atmosphere crackled with tension as much as it did with excitement. Every night brought the same unspoken battle: who would catch the eye of the big spender at the corner table? Which girl would get the most dance requests? The competition wasn't just about money, though that mattered plenty. It was about survival in a world where being forgotten meant being broke. Smart girls learned quickly that certain tactics worked better than others. Some relied on their looks, others on their wit, and a few lucky ones had genuine singing voices that could silence a rowdy crowd. But here's where things got interesting. The most successful weren't always the prettiest. They were the ones who understood the game. Backstage rivalries played out in subtle ways. A missing hair ribbon right before showtime, whispered rumors about which girl had been seen talking too long with someone's regular customer, false compliments delivered with razor-sharp smiles. The cattiness could be legendary. Sarah Jenkins, from a Colorado mining town, wrote in her diary about how one girl would deliberately step on another's dress hem during group numbers, causing embarrassing tears. Another favorite trick involved switching out rouge pots with cheaper, streaky makeup that looked terrible under gaslight. These weren't just pranks, they were calculated moves in a high-stakes competition. Then there were the serious confrontations. When Mary Diamond O'Malley discovered that her supposed friend had been telling customers lies about her personal life, the resulting fight became saloon legend. Hair-pulling, scratching, and colorful language that would make a cowboy blush. The owner had to separate them with a bucket of cold water. But competition wasn't the whole story. Some of the strongest bonds in the frontier formed between saloon girls who chose to look out for each other instead of tearing each other down. These alliances meant everything in a world where danger lurked around every corner. Real friendship in this business looked different than anywhere else. It meant splitting tips when one girl had a bad night, covering for someone who was too sick to work but couldn't afford to miss wages. Most importantly, it meant having someone watch your back when customers got too aggressive or owners became unreasonable. The sister system developed naturally in many establishments. Experienced girls would take newcomers under their wings, teaching them which customers to avoid, how to maximize their earnings, and where to hide their savings. This mentorship wasn't charity, it was smart business. A well-trained new girl made the whole operation run smoother. Secret codes evolved between trusted friends. A particular hand signal meant this customer is trouble. A specific phrase warned that the owner was in a bad mood. These women developed their own language of survival, passed down from one generation of saloon girls to the next. Some friendships transcended the workplace entirely. Girls would pool their money to rent better rooms away from the saloon. They'd shop together, sharing clothes and accessories to stretch their budgets further. On rare days off, they'd attend church services or community events, presenting a united front against the disapproving stares of respectable women. The most touching friendships involved girls caring for each other during illness or injury. When consumption, accidents or violence struck, having allies meant the difference between recovery and destitution. These women nursed each other through fevers, shared medicine, and sometimes even raised money for funerals when tragedy struck. But loyalty had its limits, and even the closest friendships could shatter under pressure. Money troubles, romantic entanglements with the same customer, or simple jealousy could destroy years of trust in a single night. The heartbreak was often worse than any romantic disappointment. Interestingly, the most successful saloon girls often found ways to rise above the petty competition. They understood that a rising tide lifted all boats. When the establishment thrived, everyone benefited. These natural leaders would organize group performances, negotiate better working conditions, and even pool resources to help girls transition to other careers. Annie Thompson became famous in Nevada for her ability to turn rivals into allies. She'd host weekly gatherings in her boarding house room, where girls would share gossip, trade beauty tips, and plan strategies for dealing with difficult customers or owners. Her parlor meetings became legendary throughout the territory. The bonds formed in these establishments often lasted long after the saloon days ended. Former rivals became lifelong friends when they moved on to marriage or other careers. They'd correspond by letter, visit each other in distant towns, and maintain networks of support that spanned the entire western frontier. Of course, surviving the intricate social dynamics was just one challenge these women faced. Beyond managing friendships and rivalries, they also had to navigate the complex world of romantic relationships, both with customers and among themselves. The heart rarely followed the rules of good business sense. For all the fancy dresses and wild nights, many saloon girls harbored a surprisingly traditional dream: marriage. Not the shotgun weddings that happened after too much whiskey, but real partnerships that could pull them away from the smoky chaos of frontier nightlife. The irony wasn't lost on anyone. Women who entertained dozens of men each night often yearned for just one good man to call their own. The path to finding that special someone came with its own strange rules. Saloon girls met more eligible bachelors in a single evening than most respectable women encountered in a year. Cowboys flush with cattle drive money, successful miners, ambitious storekeepers, even the occasional traveling businessman, all passed through those swinging doors. Some arrived looking for quick fun, but others found themselves genuinely smitten with the witty, independent women who could hold their own in any conversation. Smart girls knew the difference between a man's weekend swagger and his actual character. They watched how potential suitors treated the piano player, the bartender, even the town drunk. Did he tip generously? Did he get mean when he lost at cards? More importantly, did he see her as a person, or just part of the evening's entertainment? These observations mattered because a bad marriage could trap a woman far worse than saloon work ever did. Then there were the regulars who developed genuine feelings. These men often started as casual customers, but found themselves returning not just for the dancing or drinks, but for specific conversations with particular girls. They'd bring small gifts, maybe a book of poetry, a piece of ribbon, or news from back east. The smart ones understood that rushing wouldn't work. Building trust took time, especially with women who'd learned to be wary of men's promises. But here's where things got complicated. A successful courtship meant the girl would leave her job, and saloon owners didn't appreciate losing their best earners. Some bosses tried to sabotage budding romances by spreading rumors about the suitor's character or finances. Others raised the stakes by offering the girl more money or better working conditions. The pressure could be intense, and not every romance survived the interference. The wedding preparations themselves often became town events. Frontier communities loved a good celebration, and watching a saloon girl transition to married life provided endless entertainment. Local seamstresses competed to design the most beautiful wedding dress, often working for free just to showcase their skills. The bride's saloon friends would pool their money for gifts, sometimes surprising everyone with their generosity and taste. Marriage didn't just change the woman's social status, it completely transformed her daily existence. Instead of sleeping until noon, she'd wake with the sun to prepare breakfast. Instead of fancy dresses and painted lips, she'd wear simple calico and focus on practical tasks. The adjustment wasn't always smooth. Some former saloon girls struggled with the quiet domesticity after years of constant excitement and social interaction. What surprised many townspeople was how well these marriages often worked. Saloon girls brought unique strengths to their new roles as wives. They understood men's moods and motivations better than most women. They'd learned to manage money carefully, having seen too many fortunes lost at gaming tables. They knew how to entertain guests, organize social gatherings, and handle themselves in tough situations. These weren't sheltered girls who'd faint at the first sign of trouble. The wedding ceremonies themselves ranged from simple courthouse affairs to elaborate church celebrations, depending on the couple's circumstances and the community's acceptance. Some brides chose to marry quietly and leave town immediately, starting fresh where their past wouldn't follow them. Others stayed and gradually earned their neighbors' respect through good deeds and steady behavior. Not every marriage proposal came from love, though. Some desperate men simply needed wives to help run their businesses or care for their children. Others were drawn more to the woman's savings than her personality. Experienced saloon girls learned to spot these opportunists quickly. They'd developed sharp instincts about people's true motivations, and those skills served them well when evaluating potential husbands. The most successful marriages often surprised everyone involved. A tough mining foreman might discover his former saloon girl wife had excellent business sense and could help expand his operations. A struggling shopkeeper might find his bride's social skills brought new customers and community connections he'd never managed to make on his own. The transformation from saloon girl to respectable married woman required careful navigation. Former customers had to learn new boundaries. No more flirtatious banter or familiar conversation. The woman herself had to master the art of selective memory, gracefully pretending she didn't recognize certain men when passing them on the street with her husband. Of course, not every girl who dreamed of marriage found her prince charming in the saloon. But those who did discovered something interesting about frontier society. People were often more willing to forget your past if you proved your worth in the present. The West's shortage of women meant communities couldn't afford to be too picky about their neighbors' histories. Still, even the happiest marriages couldn't erase the complex relationships that developed between saloon owners and their employees. Some bosses became almost parental figures, while others turned into bitter enemies when crossed. Behind every saloon girl strutting across those wooden floors stood someone calling the shots. The owner might have been a weathered prospector who struck it rich, or maybe a sharp-dressed businessman from back east looking to cash in on the frontier boom. These weren't just bartenders serving whiskey. They were running complex entertainment operations that could make or break a town's nightlife. Most saloon owners had one eye on profit and another on survival. They knew their success depended entirely on keeping customers happy while avoiding the kind of trouble that brought unwanted attention from law enforcement. Smart owners treated their girls like valuable assets. After all, a popular dancer could bring in 20 times more revenue than a surly bartender ever would. The good owners, they provided decent meals, clean rooms, and genuine protection when things got ugly. Some even helped girls save money or find respectable work when they were ready to leave. But then there were the others, the ones who saw dollar signs instead of human beings. These bosses skimmed tips, charged outrageous fees for costumes, and turned a blind eye when customers got too rough. Madams operated on an entirely different level. While saloon owners focused on drinks and dancing, madams managed the more intimate side of frontier entertainment. These women, and they were almost always women, ran tight ships with iron fists wrapped in silk gloves. A successful madam needed the cunning of a politician, the business sense of a banker, and the toughness of a prize fighter. The relationship between saloon owners and madams could be tricky. Sometimes they worked as partners, splitting profits and sharing expenses. Other times they competed fiercely for the same customers and territory. Imagine trying to run two different businesses under one roof while keeping everyone happy. Talk about a management nightmare. Favoritism created more drama than a traveling theater company. Owners and madams both had their pet girls, the ones who brought in the most money or caused the least trouble. These favorites got the best costumes, prime spots on the dance floor, and protection from difficult customers. Makes sense from a business perspective, right? But it also stirred up jealousy and resentment among the other girls faster than you could shuffle a deck of cards. Rules varied wildly depending on who was in charge. Some owners ran their establishments like military operations with strict schedules, dress codes, and conduct requirements. Girls had to be downstairs by a certain time, couldn't drink real alcohol during work hours, and faced fines for everything from tardiness to arguing with customers. Other owners took a more relaxed approach, figuring happy girls meant happy customers. Madams typically enforced even stricter guidelines. They had to protect their reputations and avoid raids that could shut down their operations permanently. House rules covered everything from hygiene standards to which customers could be trusted alone with the girls. Breaking these rules could mean immediate dismissal, or worse. The financial arrangements got complicated fast. Owners usually took a percentage of everything: drink commissions, dance fees, and tips. Madams operated similarly. but often provided more services in return, including medical care, legal protection, and help dealing with violent customers. Some girls preferred working under madams because they offered more security, even if it meant giving up a bigger cut of their earnings. Competition between establishments could turn vicious. Owners might try to poach each other's best performers, with promises of better pay or working conditions. Madams engaged in similar tactics, sometimes offering signing bonuses or exclusive arrangements to lure girls away from competitors. This musical chairs approach kept everyone on their toes, but also meant girls could sometimes negotiate better deals. The smart bosses understood that reputation mattered more than quick profits. A saloon known for treating its girls fairly attracted better performers and more customers. Word spread fast in small frontier towns, and nobody wanted to drink at a place with a reputation for violence or exploitation. Well-run establishments became community gathering places where people felt safe spending their hard-earned money. But running these operations required walking a constant tightrope. Too much noise and the authorities might shut you down. Too little excitement and customers went elsewhere. Owners and madams had to read the political winds, knowing when to lay low and when to throw bigger parties. They also needed connections with local officials, suppliers, and even rival establishments. The most successful operators were those who genuinely cared about their employees' welfare, while still maintaining firm control. They understood that scared, unhappy girls couldn't put on convincing performances, and fake smiles only fooled customers for so long. These bosses created environments where girls felt protected enough to be themselves, or at least the characters they played on stage. Yet even the best intentions couldn't always protect against the harsh realities of frontier life. Economic downturns, mining busts, or changes in local laws could destroy thriving businesses overnight. Many owners and madams who seemed powerful one day found themselves packing up and moving to the next town when circumstances shifted. The intricate dance between management and workers created its own special challenges, but it also revealed something deeper about how these communities functioned and how reputations were made and lost in frontier society. Nothing quite divided a frontier town like the sight of saloon girls walking down Main Street in broad daylight. These women existed in a strange social bubble that made everyone else uncomfortable. The respectable ladies of town, wives, mothers, churchgoers, would literally cross the street to avoid them. Kids got yanked away by their parents. Store clerks suddenly found reasons to look busy when a saloon girl entered their shop. But here's the weird part. Those same townspeople depended on the saloons for their economy. The money flowing through those establishments kept entire communities alive. Cowboys spent their wages, miners blew their gold dust, gamblers lost fortunes. Yet the women who helped generate all that cash were treated like social outcasts the moment they stepped outside those swinging doors. Church ladies whispered the loudest condemnations while their husbands secretly counted the tax revenue from saloon licenses. Makes sense, right? The hypocrisy was thick enough to cut with a knife. Sunday sermons condemned the fallen women, while Monday morning businesses tallied profits from their customers' spending sprees. Most saloon girls learned quickly to keep their two worlds completely separate. They'd shop early in the morning when fewer people were around. Some sent friends to buy groceries or medicine. Others traveled to neighboring towns for personal errands, where nobody knew their profession. The isolation was real and painful. Well, not everyone in town shared the same harsh judgment. Doctors usually treated saloon girls with the same professional courtesy they showed other patients. After all, money was money, and these women often paid their bills faster than respectable families who ran up credit. Some shopkeepers quietly appreciated their business too. Saloon girls bought quality fabrics, perfumes and jewelry that boosted profits significantly. Then there were the surprising allies. Older women who'd lived through their own hardships sometimes showed unexpected kindness. A baker's wife might slip an extra roll into a saloon girl's order. The town's seamstress would work on their dresses without judgment, understanding that everyone had to make a living somehow. These small acts of humanity meant everything to women who faced daily rejection. Children presented the most awkward encounters. Kids stared openly, fascinated by the bright clothes and bold makeup. Parents would hiss warnings about those kinds of women, creating mystery and fear around perfectly ordinary human beings. Some brave children would wave or smile before getting scolded. The saloon girls often waved back, remembering their own childhoods before life got complicated. Local newspapers added fuel to the social fire. They'd run stern editorials about moral decay, while simultaneously advertising the very establishments that employed these women. The same editor condemning saloon culture would print ads for Saturday night entertainment. This double standard wasn't lost on anyone, especially the girls themselves. Let's not forget the men's attitudes, which were equally contradictory. During business hours, bankers and merchants treated saloon girls coolly in public, but those same men might slip them notes, buy them drinks, or even propose marriage when nobody was watching. The social rules demanded public rejection while private desires told different stories. Some saloon girls fought back against their reputation in clever ways. They'd dress conservatively during the day, attend church services sitting in back pews and donate to charity drives. Others organized their own community events, like caring for sick townspeople or helping during emergencies. Slowly, a few managed to earn grudging respect from their neighbors. The gossip networks in small towns made privacy nearly impossible. Everyone knew which girls sent money to family back east. People noticed who visited the doctor frequently or seemed unhappy. Rumors spread about romantic relationships, business dealings and personal struggles. Living under such constant scrutiny required thick skin and careful behavior, and the weird part is how quickly attitudes could shift when disaster struck. During fires, floods or disease outbreaks, social barriers temporarily crumbled. Saloon girls would nurse the sick, feed the hungry, and comfort the grieving alongside respectable women. Crisis revealed true character, and many saloon girls showed remarkable generosity and courage. Despite the harsh treatment, some managed to gradually improve their standing through sheer persistence and good deeds. They'd become fixtures in the community, earning nicknames like Doc Mary for their medical knowledge or Teacher Kate for helping children with reading. Time and consistent kindness could sometimes overcome initial prejudices. The irony was that many saloon girls came from backgrounds identical to their critics. They'd grown up in farming families, attended the same kind of schools and shared similar values. Circumstances, not character, had led them to frontier entertainment, but social judgment rarely considers life's complexities and harsh realities. What made these social dynamics even more interesting was how different towns developed their own unwritten rules about interacting with saloon girls. Some communities were surprisingly tolerant, while others maintained rigid barriers that lasted for decades. The local culture shaped everyone's daily experience in profound ways, but reputation was just one challenge these women faced. The clothes they wore to maintain their professional image created entirely different problems and expenses that most people never considered. Saloon girls didn't just throw on any old dress and call it a night. Fashion was their weapon, their advertisement, and sometimes their armor, all rolled into one colorful package. The way they dressed could mean the difference between a handful of coins and a pocketful of silver dollars. Bustle skirts ruled the dance floors of the 1870s and 1880s. These contraptions made women's hips look impossibly wide, creating an hourglass silhouette that caught every man's eye in the saloon. The wire and padding underneath could be a nightmare to dance in, but it gave girls that dramatic swoosh when they spun around the floor. Smart girls learned to use their bustles like stage props, bumping into customers accidentally to start conversations. Bright colors dominated the saloon scene, while respectable ladies wore dull browns and grays. Saloon girls blazed in emerald green, ruby red and electric blue. The brighter the better was the unwritten rule. These bold hues showed up beautifully under flickering gaslight and oil lamps, making girls glow like exotic birds in a room full of dusty cowboys. Lace became the secret ingredient that separated amateur dancers from seasoned professionals. A touch of black lace on a red dress suggested mystery. White lace on blue looked innocent but inviting. Girls traded lace scraps like currency, sewing them onto necklines, sleeves and hemlines to refresh old dresses. Some enterprising seamstresses in frontier towns made fortunes selling lace by the yard to saloon girls who knew its power. Then there's the shoe situation, which was honestly a disaster waiting to happen. Delicate slippers with thin soles looked gorgeous but lasted about as long as a snowball in August on rough wooden dance floors. Girls went through shoes faster than gamblers went through poker chips. Many resorted to stuffing cardboard inside worn-out soles or trading shoes back and forth depending on foot size and desperation. Borrowing clothes became an art form in itself. Friday night meant the best dress. Saturday called for something even flashier. Sunday required a fresh look entirely, with limited wardrobes and unlimited vanity. Girls developed elaborate sharing systems. Mary's blue silk might look perfect on Susan, while Susan's pearl necklace complemented Mary's green velvet. The trick was remembering who owned what after a few drinks. Fashion trends traveled surprisingly fast across the frontier. Stagecoaches and railroad cars carried more than passengers and mail. They brought copies of Harper's Bazaar and Godey's Lady's Book. Saloon girls studied these magazines like battle plans, adapting high society fashions for their own purposes. A New York socialite's elegant evening gown might inspire a Denver dance hall girl's costume, complete with creative modifications for easier movement and more dramatic flair. Accessories made ordinary dresses extraordinary. Feathers in hair suggested exotic sophistication. Ribbons around the neck drew attention upward to pretty faces. Silk flowers on shoulders added romance to practical cotton dresses. Even the poorest girls could afford a yard of ribbon or a single feather, transforming their look for mere pennies. The weird part is how much fashion rules varied from town to town. What worked in rough mining camps might seem overdone in more established cattle towns. Girls had to read their audience and adjust accordingly. Too fancy in a working man's saloon made customers feel inadequate. Too plain in an upscale gambling hall meant getting ignored for flashier competition. Jewelry presented its own challenges and opportunities. Real gems were rare and risky to wear in lawless frontier towns. Fake jewelry, however, glittered just as prettily under dim saloon lighting. Glass diamonds and brass gold fooled most customers, especially after a few whiskeys. The key was wearing it confidently, like it cost a fortune. Perfume tried its best to combat the reality of saloons' tobacco smoke, unwashed bodies, spilled beer, and general mustiness. Girls splashed on lavender water, rose oil, or whatever fragrance they could afford. Some mixed their own concoctions from flower petals and alcohol. Others relied on heavily scented soap to do double duty. Seasonal fashion adaptations kept girls busy and broke. Summer called for lighter fabrics and shorter sleeves. Winter demanded layers that still looked alluring. Spring brought out the pastels and flower patterns. Fall meant richer, deeper colors that matched the changing leaves outside saloon windows. Even a simple ribbon could transform a girl's entire evening. Tied in hair, it suggested youth and innocence. Wound around the wrist like a bracelet, it became flirtatious. Sewn onto a dress hem, it added movement and color. These tiny touches cost almost nothing but delivered maximum impact where every detail mattered. Smart girls invested their earnings back into their wardrobes, understanding that better clothes meant better tips. But they also learned when enough was enough, because looking too expensive could backfire in towns where most men earned modest wages doing hard labor. Speaking of hard labor, the physical demands of saloon work meant fashion had to be functional as well as fabulous. But functionality in a frontier saloon created its own unique set of problems that most fashion magazines never bothered to address. The smoke and noise of the saloon might have defined their nights, but many saloon girls refused to let it define their entire lives. Beyond the swinging doors and piano music, these women carved out spaces for themselves in frontier communities that often viewed them with suspicion. They weren't just pretty faces who danced for tips, they became businesswomen, caregivers, and sometimes the backbone of charitable efforts in towns that desperately needed stability. Sarah Mitchell worked the dance halls in Deadwood for 3 years before she noticed something troubling. Kids were running wild in the streets while their fathers gambled away paychecks. She started organizing Sunday afternoon gatherings where local children could learn basic reading and numbers. The respectable ladies in town turned their noses up at the idea of a saloon girl teaching their children, but desperate parents didn't care about Sarah's night job when she was the only one willing to help their kids learn. Then there was the matter of charity work. Saloon girls often earned more in a week than most women saw in months, and many felt obligated to help those less fortunate. When winter hit hard or mining accidents left families without breadwinners, it was frequently the dance hall girls who organized relief efforts. They understood poverty and desperation better than the wealthy merchant wives who rarely opened their purses for such causes. The weird part is how these acts of kindness slowly changed public opinion in some towns. People started seeing beyond the rouge and ruffles to recognize genuine compassion. A girl who spent her evenings entertaining rowdy miners might spend her afternoons nursing sick neighbors or collecting funds for a widow with small children. Makes sense when you think about it. Who better to understand hardship than women who'd often fled desperate circumstances themselves? Some girls took their earnings and invested in legitimate businesses that served the whole community. Mary Red O'Sullivan saved every penny from her dancing career in Virginia City until she could open a proper laundry service. Her business became essential to every family in town, and suddenly nobody questioned her past. Well, at least not to her face. Boarding houses represented another popular escape route from saloon life while staying in the same town. Former dance hall girls understood what newcomers needed: clean beds, decent meals, and someone who wouldn't judge their backgrounds too harshly. These establishments often became safe havens for other women trying to start fresh in frontier communities. Let's not forget the girls who became informal doctors and midwives. In towns where trained physicians were scarce or expensive, saloon girls with basic medical knowledge filled crucial gaps. They'd learn to treat injuries from saloon brawls, handle medical emergencies and care for sick colleagues. This experience translated well to helping deliver babies, setting broken bones and nursing community members through illnesses. Their practical knowledge often proved more valuable than formal training that didn't exist anyway. But why did some townspeople slowly warm up to these women while others remained hostile? The answer usually came down to individual relationships and personal experiences. When a saloon girl saved someone's child from drowning or organized food for a family after a house fire, it became harder to dismiss her as immoral. Actions spoke louder than gossip, even in small towns where both traveled fast. The business ventures these women started often became pillars of their communities. Dress shops run by former saloon girls understood fashion and what women actually wanted to wear. They'd learned about fabrics, colors and styles from their own elaborate costumes. Some opened restaurants that served better food than the typical frontier fare of beans and hardtack. Others established millinery shops or took in sewing work that helped every woman in town look more presentable. These quiet acts of community building rarely made headlines, but they shaped the character of countless Western settlements. A former dance hall girl might organize the town's first proper Independence Day celebration or start a lending library in the back room of her business. Small gestures that brought civilization to rough-and-tumble frontier life. And the strange truth is that some of these women became unofficial town historians. They remembered who helped whom during hard times, which families had feuds, and how the community had grown and changed. Their saloon work had given them a unique perspective on human nature and local politics that proved invaluable in other roles. The transition from saloon life to community leader wasn't always smooth. Former colleagues sometimes felt abandoned when a girl went respectable. Established townspeople remained suspicious of motives and backgrounds, but persistence and genuine service gradually opened doors that had initially seemed permanently closed. Yet even as these women built new lives and reputations, they carried knowledge and skills that would prove essential when trouble struck. Their understanding of dangerous men, their ability to spot lies, and their experience handling volatile situations made them valuable allies in unexpected ways. After hours of swirling skirts, clinking glasses and smoke-filled laughter, saloon girls faced a reality most customers never thought about. Where exactly did these women sleep? The answer wasn't pretty. Most girls crammed into tiny rooms above or behind the saloon, sharing space with 2 or 3 others in quarters barely big enough for one person. Privacy was a luxury nobody could afford. Thin wooden walls meant every conversation, every argument, every sob could be heard by neighbors. Girls learned to whisper their secrets and muffle their tears with pillows. Personal belongings stayed in battered trunks or wooden crates shoved under narrow beds. Space was so tight that getting dressed often meant taking turns or bumping elbows constantly. Then there was the theft problem. Money disappeared faster than morning mist. When desperate women lived so close together, smart girls never kept all their earnings in one place. Some sewed coins into dress hems or tucked bills inside their corsets. Others made deals with trusted shopkeepers in town to hold their savings. The unlucky ones woke up to find their hard-earned tips vanished overnight, stolen by someone they considered a friend. The rooms themselves were basically wooden boxes with small windows, if any windows at all. Summer heat turned these spaces into ovens, while winter cold seeped through every crack in the walls. Girls hung blankets over doorways for privacy and stuffed rags in wall gaps to keep out wind. A single oil lamp or candle provided light, creating fire hazards that terrified everyone but couldn't be avoided. Some lucky girls found boarding houses willing to rent to saloon workers. These places cost more but offered actual privacy, cleaner sheets, and sometimes even hot meals. The catch: most boarding house owners looked down on saloon girls and charged them extra fees just because of their profession. Still, having a room with a real door that locked was worth the extra expense for those who could manage it. Shared living meant shared everything else too. Girls pooled money for soap, took turns washing clothes in the same basin, and borrowed each other's dresses constantly. Arguments over missing stockings or who used the last bit of face powder could turn ugly fast. But these cramped quarters also created unlikely families among women who had nowhere else to turn. The weird part is how these living situations actually saved lives. When one girl fell sick, others nursed her back to health. If someone didn't come home after work, roommates went searching. Dangerous customers got blacklisted when word spread through the shared rooms. Information traveled faster than wildfire in these tight spaces, including warnings about which men to avoid and which saloon owners could be trusted. Meals were community affairs by necessity. One girl might buy bread, another contributed beans, and someone else scrounged up coffee or tea. Cooking happened on small wood stoves that barely heated the cramped spaces, but somehow managed to feed everyone. The food wasn't fancy, mostly beans, biscuits, and whatever vegetables they could afford, but it filled empty stomachs after long nights of work. Well, cleanliness became a group effort too. Bath days meant heating water over the stove and sharing a single tub among multiple women. Girls developed systems for everything: who bathed first, who got the cleanest water, who helped wash hard-to-reach spots. Laundry hung from ropes strung across rooms, creating obstacle courses of drying petticoats and stockings. Sleep schedules presented their own challenges. Some girls worked until dawn, while others finished earlier, meaning someone was always coming or going at odd hours. Light sleepers suffered constantly from footsteps, conversations, and doors creaking at all hours. Many learned to sleep with pillows over their heads or cotton stuffed in their ears. But why did so many girls choose these miserable living conditions? The answer was simple: they had no other choice. Hotels wouldn't rent to unaccompanied women, especially ones working in saloons. Respectable boarding houses turned them away outright. Family homes were either too far away or had already rejected them for their career choices. Despite everything, these shared rooms became headquarters for escape planning. Girls whispered about saving enough money to leave town, discussed which cities might offer better opportunities, and shared information about marriage prospects or other job possibilities. Hidden beneath floorboards or inside trunk linings, secret stashes of money slowly grew as women prepared for their next chapter. The bonds formed in these crowded, uncomfortable spaces often lasted lifetimes. Women who moved on to respectable marriages or different careers still sent letters to former roommates. Some even sent money to help others escape saloon life. These weren't just living arrangements, they were survival networks that kept vulnerable women alive in dangerous times. Speaking of survival, the cramped quarters were just one challenge these women faced daily. Even more dangerous were the dark streets they had to navigate after work ended. Survival in the saloons wasn't about luck. It was about reading people like a book before they even opened their mouths. Smart saloon girls developed an almost supernatural ability to spot trouble brewing across a crowded room. The way a man's shoulders tensed when he lost at cards, how his voice changed after his fifth whiskey, whether his eyes tracked the exits or stayed glued to his drink. These weren't skills you learned in finishing school. They came from necessity, sharpened night after night until they became second nature. A girl who couldn't read the room didn't last long in this business. The first rule: always know where the back door is. Experienced girls memorized every exit, window, and hiding spot in their workplace. When fists started flying, you had maybe 10 seconds before the whole place erupted. The smart ones were already moving towards safety, while others stood frozen, watching the action unfold. But escaping wasn't just about quick feet. It required planning that would make a military strategist proud. Girls developed elaborate systems for protecting their earnings, the obvious purse hanging from their wrist. That held maybe $1 in small coins. The real money stayed hidden in secret pockets sewn into petticoats, tucked inside boot heels, or stashed in hollowed-out hair combs. Decoy purses became an art form. Some girls carried 3 different pouches, one for show, one with enough real money to satisfy a thief, and the third with their actual savings. If someone demanded their earnings, they'd hand over the middle purse with just enough reluctance to make it believable. Meanwhile, the real prize stayed safely hidden. Then there were the allies. No girl survived alone in this world. The smartest ones cultivated relationships with bartenders, musicians, and even the cleaning staff. These people saw everything and could warn about dangerous customers before trouble started. A bartender might mention that the man in the corner had been muttering threats. The piano player could signal with a particular song when it was time to leave. Street smarts mattered more than book learning in this business. Girls learned to trust their instincts above everything else. If something felt wrong about a customer, it probably was. The polite gentleman who tipped well but asked too many personal questions. The quiet drinker who watched everyone too carefully. The regular whose behavior suddenly changed. Communication between girls developed its own secret language. A hand signal might mean watch out for the man in the blue shirt. Arranging items on a table in a certain way could warn others about a customer who'd gotten rough. These silent codes saved lives and prevented assaults more times than anyone could count. The truly clever girls studied their customers like scientists. They remembered who drank what, who had family back east, who'd just gotten paid. This knowledge became currency. Knowing that Big Jim always got violent when someone mentioned his dead brother could prevent a beating. Understanding that the banker's son would spend his father's money to impress a girl meant easy earnings. But physical safety required more than just observation skills. Many girls carried small weapons, hat pins sharpened to deadly points, tiny derringers tucked into garters, or slim knives hidden in their sleeves. These weren't for show. When a 150-pound girl faced off against a drunk cowboy twice her size, equalizers made the difference between survival and disaster. Learning to fight dirty was another essential skill. Formal boxing rules didn't apply when someone was trying to hurt you. Girls taught each other pressure points, how to break a nose with an upward palm strike, where to kick to drop a man instantly. The goal wasn't to win a fair fight, it was to create enough pain and confusion to escape. Money management became a survival skill too. Smart girls never flashed their earnings or bragged about good nights. They learned which banks could be trusted, how to send money home safely, and when to keep cash versus when to invest in property. Some girls bought small plots of land under fake names, creating escape funds for when saloon life became too dangerous. The psychological aspects of staying safe were just as important as the physical ones. Girls learned to project confidence even when terrified, to smile while calculating distances to exits, to laugh at crude jokes while planning their next move. This emotional armor protected them from customers who sensed weakness like predators. Housing arrangements played a huge role in safety strategies. Girls who lived above the saloon faced different dangers than those who found independent lodging. Each situation required different precautions, different allies, different escape routes. Smart girls always had backup plans for their backup plans, yet for all these precautions and street-smart strategies, danger still lurked in the shadows of frontier towns. The darkness held different threats than the bright, noisy saloons, and walking those empty streets after midnight required a completely different set of survival skills. Walking home after a long night in the saloon was like playing a deadly game of chance. The same streets that bustled with activity during the day transformed into something completely different once darkness fell. Empty alleys stretched like black mouths between buildings, loose boards creaked underfoot. Every shadow could hide trouble. Always watching over your shoulder, always planning escape routes, always wondering if tonight might be different. That kind of stress aged people fast. Many girls looked forward to the day they could walk home in safety, but first they had to navigate relationships with the very people supposed to protect them. The badge didn't always mean safety for saloon girls in frontier towns. Sheriff Johnson might tip his hat politely to Miss Sally on Monday, then raid her workplace on Tuesday if the mayor's wife complained about immoral activities happening too close to the church. Western lawmen walked a tricky line between keeping order and keeping everyone happy. Most sheriffs had bigger fish to fry than worrying about dance hall girls. Bank robberies, cattle rustling, and shootouts in the street took priority over whether Betty's dress was too revealing, or if the piano played past midnight. Smart lawmen knew that saloons brought money into town. Cowboys spent their wages there. Miners blew off steam after dangerous shifts, and even traveling businessmen needed somewhere to unwind. Shut down the entertainment, and you might lose half your tax base. But here's where things got interesting. Some sheriffs developed mutually beneficial relationships with saloon girls that had nothing to do with romance or corruption. These women heard everything. Drunk men spilled secrets about upcoming cattle drives, mentioned suspicious strangers camping outside town, or bragged about crimes they'd committed in other territories. A smart girl could trade information for protection. Sheriff, that fellow in the brown coat, he's been asking awful specific questions about when the bank closes. Might earn a girl a favor she could cash in later. Maybe the sheriff would look the other way when her nephew visited from another state, even if everyone knew the boy wasn't her nephew and she'd never had a brother. Then there were the sheriffs who saw dollar signs instead of law and order. These men figured out that saloon owners would pay handsomely to avoid harassment. A $20 donation to the sheriff's retirement fund might ensure that Saturday night's festivities went uninterrupted. Some lawmen even took percentage cuts from gambling profits or charged monthly protection fees to madams running upstairs businesses. The girls quickly learned to read their local sheriff's personality. Was he the righteous type who'd arrest you for showing too much ankle? The practical type who ignored minor infractions as long as nobody got shot? Or the greedy type who'd shake down anyone with $1 in their pocket? Each required different survival strategies. Closing hours became a constant battle of wits. A strict sheriff might mandate that all music stop at 10 p.m. and ladies clear the premises by 10:30. But what if the biggest spenders didn't arrive until 11? Creative saloon owners found loopholes. Maybe the official entertainment ended on schedule, but nothing stopped customers from having private conversations with friendly ladies in the back rooms. The piano might go silent, but someone could always hum quietly. Curfew enforcement varied wildly from town to town. Some sheriffs patrolled religiously, banging on doors with their billy clubs if they heard suspicious sounds after hours. Others conveniently scheduled their evening rounds to avoid certain neighborhoods entirely. A few entrepreneurial lawmen charged overtime fees, pay up, and they'd find urgent business on the other side of town until morning. The weird part is how many sheriffs secretly relied on saloon girls for maintaining order. These women knew how to calm down angry drunks, spot troublemakers before fights erupted, and talk sense into men on the verge of doing something stupid. An experienced saloon girl could defuse a dangerous situation faster than any deputy. They saved lawmen from dealing with countless minor disturbances that could have escalated into major problems. Some girls earned official respect through acts of heroism. When outlaws robbed the First National Bank of Deadwood, it was dancehall performer Diamond Lil who rode hard to the next town to alert the territorial marshal. When a cholera outbreak hit Silver City, saloon girls volunteered to nurse the sick while respectable ladies fled to safer locations. These acts of civic duty sometimes transformed their standing with local law enforcement permanently, but relationships with lawmen could turn dangerous quickly. A sheriff who'd been taking bribes might suddenly crack down harshly to prove his integrity if territorial authorities started asking questions. A girl who'd been trading information might find herself arrested on trumped-up charges if she learned something her sheriff contact didn't want revealed. The protection of a corrupt lawman was only as reliable as his current political situation. Election seasons brought special anxiety. New sheriffs meant new rules, new bribes to negotiate, new personalities to decode. A saloon girl who'd enjoyed friendly relations with Sheriff Williams might find herself facing harassment from Sheriff Thompson, who'd campaigned on cleaning up the town's moral character. Smart girls diversified their law enforcement relationships carefully. They cultivated friendships with deputies, court clerks, and even judges when possible. Having multiple allies in the justice system provided backup when their primary protector fell from grace or moved to another territory. The dance between lawmen and saloon girls reflected the broader contradictions of frontier justice. But as these women navigated the complex world of badges, bribes, and unwritten rules, they were also building something that would outlast any individual sheriff's tenure, reputations that could open doors far beyond the frontier. For most saloon girls, the work wasn't meant to last forever. Beneath all the dancing, drinking, and late-night laughter, these women harbored dreams that stretched far beyond the smoky confines of frontier saloons. They'd lie awake after particularly rough nights, listening to snoring miners in nearby rooms, and imagine themselves somewhere completely different. A little house with white curtains, a garden full of vegetables, maybe even children playing in the yard. The fantasy wasn't just about escaping the dangers and exhaustion. Many girls genuinely missed quiet moments. When was the last time they'd watched a sunset without calculating how many drinks they needed to sell that evening? Or read a book without someone demanding their attention every 5 minutes? The constant noise, smoke, and forced cheerfulness wore them down in ways they rarely admitted to each other. But dreaming was one thing. Actually leaving required serious planning and serious money. Smart girls squirreled away every spare dollar, hiding coins in hollowed-out book spines or sewn into dress hems. They couldn't exactly march into the town bank and open an account. Too many questions, too much gossip. Trust became everything when it came to protecting their escape funds. Then there's the matter of timing. Girls couldn't just announce they were quitting and expect a fond farewell party. Saloon owners had invested money in their wardrobes, lodging, and sometimes their travel west. Some contracts included penalty clauses or required girls to work a minimum number of months. Others faced more direct pressure. Owners who claimed the girls owed money for food, rent, or mysterious expenses that kept growing. The clever ones planned their exits during busy seasons when owners couldn't afford to chase after them. Spring brought fresh miners with full pockets, making it the perfect time to slip away unnoticed. A girl might claim she was visiting a sick relative in the next town over, then simply never return. By the time anyone realized she was gone for good, she'd already caught a stagecoach heading east. Marriage offered the most socially acceptable escape route. A saloon girl who married a respectable man could reinvent herself completely, leaving her old life behind like a snake shedding skin. These weren't always love matches, sometimes they were practical arrangements that benefited both parties. The man got a wife who understood how to handle difficult people and wasn't easily shocked. The woman got respectability and safety. Well, that was the theory anyway. Not every marriage rescued a saloon girl from hardship. Some husbands turned controlling or violent, especially if they'd been drinking customers who thought they owned their wives. Others moved their new brides to isolated farms or ranches where loneliness replaced the constant social interaction these women were used to. Going from entertaining dozens of people nightly to talking only to chickens and cattle could drive a person half crazy. The most successful escapes involved complete geographic moves. California attracted many former saloon girls with its promise of gold, mild weather, and cities large enough to disappear in. Others headed back east to places where nobody knew their history. A woman could claim to be a widow from another state and start fresh as a seamstress, boarding house keeper, or shopkeeper. Education became a popular second career choice. Many saloon girls were naturally smart and well-read, having spent years listening to stories from travelers and learning about different places and people. Some taught themselves additional skills during their entertainment years, practicing penmanship or studying newspapers to improve their vocabulary. With enough saved money and determination, a former saloon girl could become a school teacher in a community that never knew about her past. Running businesses proved another common path forward. These women understood customer service, money management, and how to handle difficult personalities, skills that translated perfectly to legitimate enterprises. Former saloon girls opened successful restaurants, dress shops, laundries, and boarding houses across the West. Their experience dealing with rough characters actually gave them advantages over more sheltered businesswomen. The weird part is how completely most women erased their saloon days once they moved on. They'd burn photographs, destroy letters, and refuse to discuss anything about their previous lives. Children grew up never knowing their mothers had once worn feathers and sequins, entertaining rowdy crowds until dawn. The silence was so complete that historians today struggle to piece together individual stories. Not everyone managed successful escapes though. Some girls saved for years only to lose their money to thieves, bad investments, or emergencies that drained their carefully hoarded funds. Others discovered that respectable society wasn't as welcoming as they'd hoped, facing whispered gossip and social exclusion when their pasts were revealed. Despite the challenges, thousands of saloon girls did successfully transition to conventional lives. They became wives, mothers, business owners, and community leaders. Their experiences in saloon work, learning to read people, handle money, and survive in tough situations, often served them well in their new roles. But while many escaped into anonymity, others achieved something quite different entirely. Some saloon girls became so notorious that their names echoed through history books. The Wild West created its share of larger-than-life characters, and saloon girls were no exception. While most worked quietly in small frontier towns, some became legendary figures whose names echoed across the territory. These weren't just pretty faces serving drinks, they were sharp, bold women who carved out their own destinies in a man's world. Take Calamity Jane, born Martha Jane Canary. Sure, she's famous for her wild frontier antics and supposed romance with Wild Bill Hickok, but few know she worked the saloon circuit too. Jane could drink most cowboys under the table, shoot straighter than half the men in town, and tell stories that kept entire saloons spellbound. She'd swagger in wearing men's clothes, order whiskey neat, and challenge anyone who looked at her sideways. The woman was fearless, crude, and absolutely magnetic. Then there's the mysterious Etta Place, who captivated Butch Cassidy's Wild Bunch. Historians still argue about her true identity, but what's certain is her time in saloons and dance halls across Wyoming and Colorado. Etta was elegant, educated, and dangerous, a combination that made her irresistible to outlaws and respectable men alike. She could play piano, speak multiple languages, and allegedly helped plan bank robberies. Talk about multitasking. Belle Starr earned her reputation as the Bandit Queen, but before her outlaw days, she worked saloons in Missouri and Arkansas. Belle was smart enough to use her charm as a weapon and her beauty as a shield. She'd gather information from drunk customers, pass it along to Confederate guerrillas, and still manage to look innocent when authorities came asking questions. The woman had nerves of steel. Let's not forget Big Nose Kate, Doc Holliday's tempestuous lover. Born Mary Catherine Horany in Hungary, she escaped a convent school and ended up working saloons from Dodge City to Tombstone. Kate was famous for her fiery temper and her ability to break Doc out of jail, literally. She once started a fire as a distraction, then walked him out at gunpoint while everyone fought the flames. Now that's what you call a dramatic exit. These famous women shared certain traits that set them apart from their contemporaries. They were survivors first, entertainers second. Most could handle weapons, think fast under pressure, and read people like open books. They understood that reputation was everything in the frontier. Sometimes it protected you better than any sheriff. But fame came with a price. Newspapers loved sensational stories about fallen women, often exaggerating their exploits for entertainment value. A simple barroom disagreement became a deadly shootout. A romantic relationship turned into a torrid affair that scandalized proper society. These women became characters in their own lives, playing roles that newspapers and dime novels created for them. The weird part is how differently fame affected each woman. Some embraced their notoriety, using it to open doors and make money. Others tried desperately to escape their reputations and live quietly. Calamity Jane seemed to enjoy shocking people, while Etta Place disappeared entirely, possibly reinventing herself as a respectable woman somewhere far from the frontier. Many of these legendary saloon girls were excellent businesswomen beneath their wild exteriors. They saved money, invested in property, and built networks that served them well beyond their entertainment careers. Belle Starr owned several ranches. Big Nose Kate ran boarding houses and restaurants. They understood that beauty faded, but smart investments lasted forever. Their stories also reveal the double standards of frontier society. Men could be violent, drunk, and disorderly. That was just boys being boys. But women who displayed similar behavior were labeled immoral and scandalous. These famous saloon girls refused to play by society's rules, and that rebellion made them both celebrated and reviled. What's fascinating is how their legends grew after they left the spotlight. Stories became taller with each telling. A woman who danced in saloons for 5 years might be remembered as a notorious madam who controlled an entire town. A brief romance became an epic love affair. The truth often couldn't compete with the mythology. These women influenced fashion, slang, and attitudes across the frontier. When Belle Starr wore a certain style of hat, other saloon girls copied it. When Calamity Jane used particular expressions, they spread through mining camps and cattle towns. They were trendsetters in ways that respectable women couldn't be, simply because they had more freedom to experiment. Their fame also attracted danger. Notorious women became targets for men who wanted to prove themselves, or who saw celebrity as something to possess or destroy. Several famous saloon girls died young, victims of violence that their reputations may have encouraged. But here's what made them truly legendary. They refused to disappear quietly. Even when scandal followed them, even when society rejected them, they kept reinventing themselves and pushing boundaries. Their stories spread beyond the frontier, inspiring stage plays and early motion pictures. But these famous few were just the tip of the iceberg. Thousands of other saloon girls lived equally dramatic lives, and their collective impact shaped an entire era of American history. Those wild frontier towns that once echoed with piano music and dancing feet eventually grew quiet. The saloons closed, the dance halls emptied, and most of the girls moved on to different lives. But their impact on American history runs deeper than most people realize. The saloon girls helped build the economic backbone of countless frontier settlements. Without their entertainment, many towns would have remained nothing more than dusty outposts where lonely men drank themselves into despair. Instead, these women created vibrant social centers that drew people together. Cowboys spent their wages, miners celebrated their strikes, and merchants closed deals over drinks and dancing. Makes sense, right? Money flowed because these girls knew how to keep customers happy and coming back for more. Then there's the cultural legacy they left behind. Half the slang we still use today came straight from saloon floors. Words like hooker, painted lady, and working girl entered everyday language through their world. Songs about heartbreak, adventure, and wild nights were born in those smoky rooms. Even our modern ideas about what makes someone sassy or feisty trace back to women who had to be quick-witted enough to handle drunk cowboys and smooth-talking gamblers. Hollywood certainly took notice. Every Western movie or TV show borrows heavily from saloon girl imagery. Those elaborate costumes, the can-can dancing, the dramatic romantic storylines, they all have roots in real frontier entertainment. But here's the weird part, most of what we see on screen is completely wrong. The real women were usually more businesslike than theatrical, more practical than glamorous. Let's not forget how these women challenged social expectations of their time. More proper ladies stayed home and obeyed strict rules about behavior. saloon girls traveled independently, managed their own money, and made their own choices about work and relationships. They were some of America's first female entrepreneurs, while many saved enough to buy property, start businesses, or invest in growing towns. Some became influential community leaders, though they rarely got credit for it. Their influence on women's rights was subtle but significant. By proving women could survive and thrive outside traditional domestic roles, they helped expand ideas about what was possible. Sure, society judged them harshly, but they also secretly admired their independence and courage. Young women across the country heard stories about girls who struck out on their own and made good money doing it. The economic numbers tell an interesting story too. In boom towns like Virginia City or Deadwood, entertainment districts generated massive tax revenue. Local governments depended on saloon licenses, fines and fees to fund basic services like sheriffs and fire departments. The girls themselves often contributed to charity drives and community projects. Despite being excluded from respectable social circles, modern historians are finally giving these women their due recognition. Towns that once tried to erase their saloon history now celebrate it as heritage tourism. Museums display artifacts from dance halls, and historical societies research the real stories behind the legends. Turns out, many saloon girls went on to become teachers, shop owners, ranchers' wives, and community volunteers. Their later lives were often more conventional than their wild reputations suggested. The impact on American literature and music was enormous. Dime novels of the era featured saloon girl heroines who were brave, clever, and resourceful. Folk songs preserved their stories, and later country and Western music drew heavily on themes of love, loss, and redemption that originated in saloon culture. Even today, popular music references the imagery and attitudes these women pioneered. What's really fascinating is how their legacy intersects with broader American ideals about reinvention and second chances. The West represented a place where your past didn't define your future, and saloon girls embodied that perfectly. Many transformed themselves multiple times, from farm girls to entertainers, to respectable matrons to community leaders. Their stories also highlight the complex relationship between morality and survival on the frontier. While Eastern society condemned their choices, Western communities often developed more pragmatic attitudes. People recognized that everyone was just trying to make it in a harsh, uncertain world. This helped create the West's reputation for being more tolerant and less judgmental than other regions. The influence extended to fashion and style trends that spread far beyond frontier towns. Bright colors, elaborate hairstyles, and bold accessories that saloon girls popularized eventually influenced mainstream fashion. Department stores in major cities began selling Western-inspired clothing that borrowed heavily from saloon aesthetics. Their legacy reminds us that American history was shaped by all kinds of people, not just the ones who got their names in official records. These women left their mark through culture, economics, and social change rather than politics or warfare. They proved that influence doesn't always come through conventional channels, but the biggest myth about saloon girls might be that their stories ended when the frontier closed. In reality, their daughters and granddaughters carried forward lessons about independence, resilience, and refusing to be limited by other people's expectations, lessons that would prove crucial as America entered the modern era. Hollywood loves a good saloon girl story. Gunslinging beauties in feathered hats, dancing on bar tops while cowboys throw gold coins at their feet. The reality? Well, that's where things get interesting. Most people think every woman who worked in a frontier saloon was selling more than just drinks and conversation. The truth is far more complicated. Many saloon girls were simply entertainers, dancers, singers, and hostesses who never took a customer upstairs. They made good money just keeping men company, encouraging them to buy another round, and providing some much-needed female conversation in towns where women were scarcer than honest poker games. The work wasn't nearly as glamorous as the movies make it seem either. Those beautiful gowns, often second-hand, patched up, and reeking of tobacco smoke after a single night. The easy money promised in those recruitment ads came with a hefty price tag. Girls worked grueling hours, dealt with drunk and sometimes violent customers, and lived in cramped quarters that offered little privacy or safety. But here's something that might surprise you. Some saloon owners genuinely cared about their girls. They provided protection, decent meals, and fair wages. Others were complete scoundrels who took advantage of vulnerable women far from home. The experience varied wildly depending on which establishment you landed in and who ran it. Let's not forget the romanticized idea that these women were all tragic figures forced into desperate circumstances. While poverty and limited options certainly drove many to saloon work, others chose it freely. Some were entrepreneurs who saw an opportunity to make more money than they ever could as seamstresses or domestic workers. A few even parlayed their earnings into legitimate businesses or property investments. The myth of the heart of gold prostitute appears in countless Western stories, but the reality was more nuanced. Some saloon girls were incredibly generous, sending money home to family or helping newcomers get established. Others were ruthless competitors who'd steal customers or sabotage rivals without a second thought. Human nature, it turns out, doesn't change much regardless of profession or time period. Movie saloons always seem to have the same cast of characters: the stern but fair madam, the innocent girl who doesn't belong, the veteran with a secret past. Real saloons were messier. You'd find former teachers, runaway daughters of wealthy families, widows with no other options, and yes, some women who genuinely enjoyed the excitement and attention. The backgrounds were as varied as the women themselves. Then there's the whole dancing on tables stereotype. Most saloon entertainment happened on actual stages or designated dance floors. The wild anything-goes atmosphere depicted in films would have been bad for business. Saloon owners needed to maintain some level of order to keep customers coming back and avoid trouble with local authorities. The weapons situation gets exaggerated too. While some girls did carry small pistols or knives for protection, they weren't gunslinging Annie Oakley types. Self-defense was more about avoiding dangerous situations than shooting their way out of trouble. Smart girls learned to read customers, diffuse tensions, and get help when needed. And the weird part is how the survival skills these women developed rarely get mentioned in popular stories. They became experts at reading people, managing difficult personalities, handling money, and running small businesses. Many applied these talents successfully in their post-saloon careers. The entertainment industry taught them valuable lessons about customer service and self-promotion that served them well in legitimate enterprises. The romanticized version also glosses over the health risks. Working in smoky, crowded saloons during an era with limited medical care was genuinely dangerous. Disease spread quickly, and many girls suffered from respiratory problems, exhaustion, and injuries. The toll on their physical and mental health was real and lasting. What's particularly misleading is how Hollywood portrays the relationships between saloon girls and townsfolk. The reality was more complex than simple rejection or acceptance. Some communities eventually embraced former saloon girls who married and settled down. Others maintained a permanent grudge. Social mobility was possible but not guaranteed. The biggest myth might be that saloon girls were passive victims of circumstance. Many were shrewd businesswomen who understood their value in male-dominated frontier towns. They negotiated better working conditions, demanded fair treatment, and looked out for each other. The stereotype of the helpless fallen woman doesn't capture their resilience and adaptability. Modern audiences often struggle to understand why women would choose such work voluntarily. The limited options available to women in the 1800s provide crucial context. Saloon work, despite its risks and social stigma, offered more autonomy and earning potential than most alternatives. These myths and misconceptions shape how we remember the Old West, but they also obscure the real experiences of thousands of women who helped build frontier communities. Understanding what their lives were actually like reveals something important about the complexity of survival, choice, and opportunity in a rapidly changing America. The legacy of these women extends far beyond the legends, influencing how we think about women's work, independence, and the price of survival in challenging times. Saloon girls weren't just colorful characters dancing through dusty frontier towns. They were real women making real choices in impossible circumstances. Their stories matter because they show us something most history books skip over: how ordinary people survived extraordinary times. These women didn't just entertain rowdy cowboys and miners, they built communities. When someone got sick, saloon girls often provided the nursing care. When orphaned children needed help, many of these fallen women stepped up with food and shelter. They organized charity events, helped fund schools, and sometimes became the backbone of social life in towns where respectable women were scarce. But here's what makes their legacy truly important. They challenged every assumption about what women could and couldn't do. While Eastern ladies were expected to stay home and embroider, saloon girls were running businesses, negotiating with difficult men, and making financial decisions that would make modern entrepreneurs proud. They carried weapons, traveled alone, and stood their ground in situations that would terrify most people today. The myths paint them as either helpless victims or heartless temptresses. Reality was far more complex. Some were victims of circumstance, sure. Others were shrewd businesswomen who saw opportunity where everyone else saw scandal. Many fell somewhere in between, women doing what they had to do while trying to maintain their dignity and dreams. Their economic impact gets overlooked too often. Saloon girls didn't just make money, they moved it around. They sent cash back east to support families. They invested in local businesses, bought property, and created jobs for seamstresses, laundresses, and boarding house operators. In boom towns across the West, these women were often the difference between a temporary mining camp and a permanent settlement. Then there's the question of choice versus desperation. Modern discussions about these women sometimes get tangled up in whether they were empowered or exploited. The truth? Both, often at the same time. A girl might feel powerful commanding attention from a room full of men, while simultaneously feeling trapped by limited options. She could be making more money than the town banker, while knowing that one wrong move could leave her destitute. Their survival skills were legendary for good reason. These women learned to read people like books, spot trouble before it started, and navigate dangerous situations with nothing but their wits. They developed networks of mutual support that functioned like early labor unions, sharing information about bad customers, dangerous towns, and opportunities elsewhere. What's fascinating is how many transitioned to respectable lives. The girl dancing at the Silver Dollar Saloon one year might be running a successful boarding house the next, or teaching school in California, or raising children on a ranch in Montana. Their past didn't always define their future, though it certainly shaped their strength and resourcefulness. Their influence on American culture runs deeper than most people realize. The confidence, independence, and refusal to accept limitations that we associate with the American spirit. Saloon girls embodied those qualities long before they became cultural ideals. They were feminists before feminism had a name, entrepreneurs before business schools existed. The language they used, the songs they sang, and the attitudes they brought to frontier life became part of the Western identity. Phrases like painted lady and customs around hospitality and entertainment all carry traces of saloon culture. Even modern country music owes something to the ballads and folk songs that echoed through those smoky rooms. Their stories also reveal the hypocrisy of frontier society. The same men who publicly condemned these women often depended on them for companionship, conversation, and emotional support. The same towns that officially disapproved of saloon life would have been unbearably lonely and economically poorer without it. Understanding their experiences helps us see the whole picture of Western expansion. History isn't just about cowboys, outlaws, and pioneers with covered wagons. It's about everyone who contributed to building something new in a harsh, uncertain environment. Saloon girls were part of that story, whether respectable society wanted to admit it or not. Their resilience in the face of judgment, danger, and hardship offers lessons that transcend their era. They found ways to maintain hope and humanity in circumstances designed to crush both. They created beauty and joy in places where both were scarce commodities. Most importantly, their voices remind us that the Old West wasn't built by one type of person or one kind of story. It was built by people from all backgrounds making difficult choices with courage and determination. The saloon girls who danced, sang, laughed, and survived in those frontier towns weren't just entertaining customers, they were helping build America, one night at a time. Their legacy lives on in every woman who refuses to be limited by others' expectations of what she should be.